Hey, listeners, Movie Miss here, and I just wanted to let you know before the episode began that the film we're discussing this week does star one amazing Tom Sizemore. At the time of this recording, it was previous to him being ill and hospitalized and has since passed away. We did not know any of that when we were recording this episode, so that is why it is not addressed during the episode. So I just wanted to let you know that we at the show are extremely saddened at the news that Tom Sizemore, age 61, has passed away. But we do want this episode to stand as a celebration of him. He's amazing in this movie, as you will hear in the episode. I would encourage you to still listen to the episode and celebrate him along with us. And now to the show.
Baby, you are gonna go broke showing turkeys like these.
It's turkey time. Gobble, gobble.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Let's Talk Turkeys. I'm your host, Movie Miss, and I'm being joined this week, as always, now by my co-host, Drive-In Dave. Hello, sir.
Hello.
So I think I can honestly say we are both very excited about today's movie. Am I right?
I am super excited. And actually, funny thing was that before you told me what we were going to watch, I've been itching to rewatch this movie again anyway.
Perfect.
You totally gave me an excuse to go ahead and rewatch it.
Yeah, I was due for a rewatch myself because it's been probably 4 years, give or take, since I've watched it. And every couple years, I totally pull this out because I have it on DVD.
Ditto.
But I will say in this last rewatch, I have a 4K TV, and watching it on DVD, it was a little bummer because the movie is very dark, and they purposely, in the notes I found, they purposely shot it that way, but it doesn't play well. I'm wondering if maybe a Blu-ray or a better upgraded copy would look better.
I kind of wonder that. I know I had for a number of years, I had a hard time even finding it on Blu-ray. Like I still don't own the Blu-ray. I just got the DVD, and I
Maybe
looked
they
into
never,
that at like Walmart.
maybe they never put it on Blu-ray. I'll have to look into that. I didn't look. But okay, we should probably tell everybody the movie we are covering today is The Relic from 1997, not to be confused with the movie Relic, which came out, gosh, I want to say 2020, the Australian psychological horror film. This is not that one. This is a monster movie.
There are secrets better left unknown, and treasures better left undiscovered. In 1995, a scientific expedition found something that transforms myths into nightmares. Something that gives shape to fear and form to evil. Something as powerful as it is deadly. They should never have seen it. They should never have touched it. And then, they did the unthinkable. They brought it back.
And as monster movies go, I know this is based on a book. We'll get to that in a second. This was super fucking creative, which is probably why I gravitated toward it, because I love monster movies in general, especially practical effects.
Oh, I'm the same way. I love like all the old ones. I love monster movies.
And then this one, again, because probably it had really good source material. I don't know because I haven't read the novel. It is funny, witty. The characters, even though in movies like monster movies, you don't expect the characters to be fully fleshed out. And in this movie, they aren't, but they have defining characteristics and traits, and they're interesting, which a lot of these movies don't have that.
Yeah, it is kind of a common theme. I mean, like I said, coming from like Godzilla movies and stuff, very rarely do they ever develop the human characters. It's always focused on the monsters. And I kind of feel like that in all monster movies, that you get a little bit of the characterization, but it's mainly about, okay, holy shit, here comes this giant monster. What are we going to do? And this one is like, yeah, I do think it has to do with the source material because like Quentin Tarantino would, I think he's the one that said it, of like, sometimes like as a writer, even if you don't reveal the backstory to the viewing audience, just you knowing it that can kind of help. And I think that kind of helps develop the characters a little bit better.
So this movie, we're able to discuss it as far as, even because we both love it, the criteria for it, it does qualify as a turkey. Rotten Tomato critic score of 37% and audience of 34%. I'm going to blame it on a couple of things because it had a budget of 40 to 60 million and only did 48 million worldwide. I'm blaming it all on release. They did it in dump month. They did it in January. That was just a terrible thing they did. Until recently, they started, some good movies do come out in January now, but back then it was notoriously known as dump month. And then also the marketing and promotion for this movie didn't quite let you know what it was going to be exactly, what you were in for. And I think that is a problem a lot of times too, when movies get marketed incorrectly.
Yeah, because I didn't see this in theaters. I discovered it on VHS. Yeah, like the video store or whatever. In fact, it might have been DVD. I don't know. I don't recall too well, but I just remember like the cover grabbed me. And I was like, all right, I'll give this a shot. But I had no idea going in what the hell this was going to be. And it just blew my mind. I was like, holy shit, this is awesome.
So the movie was directed by Peter Hyams, written by Amy Jones, John Raffo, Rick Jaffa, and Amanda Silver, which a lot of times you think, oh my God, there's so many writers, it's going to be terrible. I think it works to its advantage this time because it is based on a novel, some source material called Relic by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child, which was released in 95, so just 2 years prior. And I think it maybe took a few people to figure out, because Stephen King works are notorious for this. You either put too much in the movie or you don't put enough. And a lot of times that happens when he tries to adapt his own stuff. Now, I think 4 people in this case was just the right amount. And none of them were the people who wrote the novel. They were able to look at it and each of them probably bring their own take on this needs to be this way and that character should be less or more. It really works in this film because it's an hour, 50 minutes long and it goes by so fast because it's so breezy. The dialogue is witty. The action is fast paced. Like they have just enough content in here to make it interesting and fun, but it's also a scary monster movie at the same time.
I agree. I mean, I'm one of those people that's like, it's very hard to translate books, comics, anything like that that's outside of like an original movie to the big screen because there's so much. I mean, even with this, being a fan of the book, which I read after the movie, there's so much that I wanted to see in it that wasn't in it. And it's like, but it works at the same time. It's like Jaws, where it's like, okay, there's so much in Jaws that's cut out, but Spielberg did a good job doing what he did. And I feel they did the same thing with this one. It's like, okay, I don't know if everything from all that source material would have worked in this movie. It might have kind of slowed it down a little too much. It's one of those movies that's, I love it. There's things I wish that was in it, but I still love it so much that it's like, I can't sit down and complain. I'm not going to be like, oh, screw you. You didn't put this person in or that person in, or you left this part out. It's like, no, I turn it on. And then by the end of the movie, I'm just like, shit, it's over.
Yes, it goes by so fast and it's so fun. What I was able to find in my research was that it was filmed in Chicago at the Field Museum of Natural History. They originally wanted to film in New York at the whatever the big museum is there. They even offered 7 figures to allow them to film there. And they turned down the studio saying, we don't want to scare children and keep them from coming to the museum. We don't want to paint our staff in an unflattering light. So New York was like, nope, not going to do it.
Meanwhile, Chicago's like, fuck it. Everyone hates us anyways. Come on in.
Yeah, Chicago was like, great, you can do it here, no problem. And then they also built the extensive tunnels and sewer set in LA, and they filmed all of that there. The creature effects, Stan Winston and his team. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, Stan Winston's amazing anyways, and everything he touches, he does such a great job. But this is probably my favorite Stan Winston design of all time. I mean,
so much more elaborate than like Pumpkinhead or something.
It looks, I mean, there's scenes in the movie that up until doing the research, I could have swore was CGI.
Yes, they had parts with stuntmen in the different pieces of suits. They had 3 electronic creatures that moved with head, arms, claws, and mouth, different pieces. And again, like you said, there's CGI, but it's very minimal. Mm-hmm. And there's only one part, honestly, that is egregious and terrible. And we will get to it.
I think I know what part you're talking about. I can't wait to hear your thoughts.
But overall, This movie holds up, bottom line.
It really does, especially it's like coming off of our last movie and the joyous torture that I saw on your face as we were discussing it.
Dark Man?
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I had a lot of fun with that. And I do like that movie. But like you're right, it's like movies like that don't hold up today. Where like this, it's like you take out a couple of things. Like you replace a beeper with a cell phone, update somebody's hairdo, maybe give them a man bun or some shit. It's gonna fit in today's world. And
Agreed.
yeah, it's like very rarely do you get older movies that can do that.
So top build cast, we have Penelope Ann Miller, Tom Sizemore, Linda Hunt, Clayton Rohner, and Chi Moy Lo. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly. And then we can get to everybody else as we go. Now, I will mention Penelope Ann Miller and Linda Hunt in 1990 were in Kindergarten Cop together. So I thought that was really fun to see them together again.
Apparently, because I saw the same thing. And then like, I don't know if you got it off of IMDb.
Yes.
But it was like a couple of rows down, they said, I'm just going to call him Chi because I don't want to mispronounce his name. He was in Kindergarten Cop as well, they said.
Shut up, really?
Yeah. So you got 3 returning people.
That's cool. He's really good in this, by the way. It's not a big part, but as with everybody, he's so well written that all he has to say is one line and you know everything this character is about.
Oh yeah, no, the characters are they really just leap off the screen. And another cool thing that doing the research that I thought was interesting was that Penelope Ann Miller plays, I guess it was before this, a couple years before this, she was in The Shadow with Alec Baldwin, also playing a character named Margot.
Oh, you're kidding. I didn't catch that.
I just caught that by accident. I was like, oh, damn. So she's got like a track record going.
That's great. So the IMDb plot is a little irritating on this one. Usually they're not too bad. A homicide detective and an anthropologist try to destroy a South American lizard-like god who's on a people-eating rampage in a Chicago museum. She's not an anthropologist. The people that wrote this did not watch the movie, apparently. She is an evolutionary biologist. She says it like 5 times.
It's like one of the words that they there's like a couple words, one specific word we will get to that they mentioned so many times that I could swear we could do a drinking game for it.
All right. Our movie begins with credits over movie immediately, which I always appreciate. We get title card over a close-up of a raging fire. Then we pull out a little and see it is surrounded by some local tribesmen in a jungle. Men and women are chanting, playing drums, dancing. And then we see there's a man dressed, just a white male dressed in typical, like stereotypical safari gear, pith helmet, whatever, a hat, whatever he's wearing. He's taking pictures, like apparently like documenting the tribe. And this is Dr. Whitney. We don't know his name yet, but this is who this is. We see someone stirring some leaves in a pot of liquid, like they're brewing tea or something. And then we see a close-up of the leaves, that there's some kind of stuff on it. We don't know what it is yet. They look like little fish eggs or something to me right off the bat.
It looks like, and at the time I wasn't into sushi. It wasn't until a few years later that I got into sushi. But watching it now, it looks like, the fish eggs little fish eggs you get on sushi called tobiko.
And they're pink, so they pop off the leaves. So you can't miss them. You're like, what is that? And they're boiling it in this water. And then they pass him, Dr. Whitney, a ladle of this to drink. And he's, of course, does it, no problem. And then you can tell by the way that the camera shoots and the way he's acting that it's making him feel a little off, a little goofy or woozy. A tribesman in some sort of a costume comes up, dressed kind of like an animal, face painted, crawling in on all fours and scares him. And he's like, whoa. And one of the guys says, Kathoga. And the guy screams and starts freaking out because he's scared by this guy. And I can only assume it's because this stuff is getting him high or something. And he's like hallucinating.
I don't know about you, but I would never trust a drink from a random tribe. Like that just seems like you kind of wonder, is there that one dick that's going to be like, oh, no, let's give him the bottle of monkey piss. So it's like, yeah, I would probably freak out too. And then you got a half naked guy all painted up coming at you. I mean, drugs or not, my ass is going to freak out too.
So then we fade from that scene into a shipyard where Dr. Whitney is on the docks. It's at night and they're loading up some stuff. And he asks a man if he's loaded his crates yet. And they have to come off. We can't send them. Where are my crates? And the captain's like, no can do. Once it's on, cleared through customs, I was like, really? You're not a dirty businessman? All right. So he's like, nope, can't take your crates off. So Dr. Whitney stows away on the platform of other crates being lifted onto the ship. And I thought to myself in this moment, this is one of the few things in the movie where I was like, he's going to stow away for how many weeks in a cargo hold with no food, no supplies, none of his stuff.
Well, I mean, there's probably rats on the ship, so a little fire, a little salt and pepper or something. You can have like a nice little rat barbecue. It's doable. I mean, plus with him doing the whole stuff with the whole look, how you brought up the safari look and everything, and him doing all this, the first thing that popped in my mind was like, oh my God, it's Indiana Jones and the Relic of Doom.
So then he gets on board and he's in the cargo hold and he's going through crates and he can't find his and he screams and freaks out. And I thought to myself, what is his plan here? You want these crates off the ship. So what?
Why would you get upset that they're not on the ship? So it's like, yeah, it was a little confusing. I kind of took it as to, still drugged out a little bit and kind of, because he did kind of act like that, like he was still a little like frantic from the drugs or whatever was going on. But yeah, it was a very flawed plan.
Well, then we cut to as the ship is blowing its horn like it's going to pull away. It's like, oh, we see a shot of the boxes. They're sitting on the dock. And we know it's them because they're labeled to send to the Chicago Natural History Museum. Wah wah.
This to me is that point, that learning moment in the movie. Okay, instead of just going through with the crazy half-ass plan, take a moment, breathe, look at all the crates on the dock. It's probably still there.
So now we cut to Chicago, Illinois, 6 weeks later. All manner of U.S. customs agents, police agents swarming this ship at the port. Lieutenant D'Augusta, not detective, shows up, and this is Tom Sizemore. And he always, to me, he's good casting for a role like this because he always seems like a tough guy, either a thug or a cop.
He is one of those actors that's very easily stereotyped into specific roles. And it's because, he is just so good at playing those roles. My favorite movie that he's done is this movie.
Yes, his delivery of the lines, like with all of these actors, it nails, like you can tell his demeanor, how he thinks, what he's about, like immediately by the way he's carrying himself and what he's saying. It's just so good. He's so good in this. So another cop tells him the Coast Guard found this boat floating, and we get an odd foreshadowing here when D'Augusta asks, what are those tunnels over there? As they're standing at the base of the ship there. And they just randomly point to these row of tunnels that look like they go underground. And the cop is like, oh yeah, those have been there, blah, blah. He has like an explanation. He knows why they're coal tunnels and they don't use them anymore. But it was just really funny that first of all, this cop happens to know, oh, they used to run 30 coal barrels a day through there, blah, 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 or whatever. It's like, why do you know that? First of all, but then second of all, it's like, well, obviously, like a lot of things in this movie, it's an exposition drop. Like we just need to know this for later, put a pin in it kind of thing, which in this movie, I don't find annoying. I like it.
No, they did a really good job with foreshadowing and setting up, like even like later on, you see the scenes. It's like basically a nothing scene where they're going through like places in the museum and talking or whatever. And it's like they're establishing shots that will come back to be greatly important later in the movie. So like the director did an amazing job setting all this stuff up. Like it pays off in the end.
So he asks the cop who's on board, and he says, oh, Hollingsworth, to which D'Augusta says something snarky like, oh, wonderful. And I'm like, oh, okay. He doesn't like Hollingsworth, I guess. But then we find out that they're buddies, because as he boards the ship, Hollingsworth comes running over, and that's Clayton Rohner. And to connect the turkey verse, he was in April Fool's Day. He was Chaz.
He's one of those actors that's like, every time I see him, I'm like, I know him from somewhere, but I always forget like what he's in, but he's just got that memorable face that you're like, oh yeah, he's that guy.
Yes, he's not in a lot. He was in also Turkeyverse, just one of the guys. He's the guy that the main lead gets a crush on at the new school, that the dorky guy that likes James Brown. He also in recent years was in Human Centipede 3, which is super random. But the second he came on screen, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I think that's like the one performance that I didn't enjoy.
But I love this guy. So I'm so excited that he's in this. So he runs up to D'Augusta and he's like, I have something to show you. And D'Augusta corrects Hollingsworth when he says it's at the front of the boat. He's like, this is a ship. That is the bow. So Hollingsworth asks, oh, he can tell like DeGusta's annoyed and being snarky. He's all, oh, custody hearing go badly. And I love that DeGusta says, I don't want to talk about it. But then he's like, oh, she got Jerry. And you're like, oh no, like that. No wonder he's in a bad mood. DeGusta's like, I don't want to talk about it. And he walks off. So Hollingsworth, for our benefit, turns to the cop there and says, Jerry was his dog. He loves that dog.
Morning, Lieutenant. Just been to the front of the boat. I got something to show you. It's a ship, Hollingsworth, not a boat. And the pointy end is the bow. Custody hearing went badly. I don't want to talk about it. She got Jerry. What part of I don't want to talk about it is unclear.
His ex-wife got custody of his son?
His dog.
His dog?
Yeah, he really loves that dog.
I absolutely love that. You're like, oh crap, okay, divorce, kids, stuff like that, and the dog. And you're like, wait, the dog?
And me being an animal person, I was so excited. I'm like, yes, he's upset because he didn't get his dog. And that also endears him to me immediately.
I'm not a dog person. Obviously, you know, I'm a cat person, but I was like, okay, he's an animal person. I obviously loved that about him.
It lets you know that even though he's got that crusty exterior and he's snarky, that he's got a big heart. So Hollingsworth tells DeGusta the ship is registered out of Brazil. And then they go to a lower deck where there's cargo and there's smeared blood all over the outer walls when they're going in, which to me doesn't track with the bodies all being inside. I was like, why is there blood all over the outside walls?
It was this whole scene, and the further you get into it, I'll kind of voice my concern. But a lot of this scene was a little bit confusing because it was like, okay, how did some of this work? Like when you go back and you think about it, like, okay, logically, this doesn't seem to kind of pan out.
Yeah. So they're in the cargo hold and Hollingsworth is positing his theory. He's like, well, it obviously was a drug hit. There were no bodies found on board. There's blood. We brought drug dogs through. They didn't find anything. So obviously they got what they came for. Like he's convinced it's a drug hit on this boat or ship. I can hear DeGusta correcting me. So what cracked me up though is they walk past these blood smears as they're going in, and DeGusta barks at Hollingsworth. What happened here? And he goes, "Well, the forensics are going to type the blood. Don't worry, we'll type it." And I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? So you type the blood smears, and you find out that whoever died here was Type A. How does that solve your crime?
The only thing, and I know nothing about this, I'm going off of my extensive knowledge, and I say that very sarcastically, of blood spatter analysis because of the show Dexter. The only thing I can figure is like, okay, well, maybe typing it is like you can tell how many different victims were there, different blood types. Is like, okay, well, is it multiple people? Is it one person?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
What exactly is it? But it's still like in the end, it's like, okay, yeah, 5 people died or whatever. Well, you still don't know who the hell they are.
Yeah, and plus everybody's missing, so it's super weird. Inside now, they're startled by a cat, which is so funny. The cat just jumps out of nowhere, random on a ship. Hollingsworth gets startled, and DeGusta's like, "Hey, was that a black cat?" And he's rubbing what I don't know, looks like a coin or something shiny in his fingers. I'm assuming now, after having watched the movie a bunch, it's his lucky bullet that he always carries with him.
Yeah, I like that. It was kind of like establishing the whole supernatural aspect for him, paranoid about like
superstitious.
Thank you, superstitious. The whole superstitious thing. I like that about him. There was a cool little character trait that they added to him that I kind of connected with him a little bit. In fact, it was after this movie is when I started doing the whole I will not pick up a coin if it is face down.
I'm the same way from this movie.
Yeah, this movie started a lot of my superstitions, and now I'm like, okay.
But I love that about him. Again, clever to just stick it in as a brief little thing, and it's going to come back over and over and then tie in to a big thing later in the movie. So he's superstitious. We get that. Then they open a door in the floor to find the bilge below is full of dead bodies floating in there. And we even see some decapitated heads. It's not a lot. And for an R-rated movie, I was expecting a lot. For an R-rated movie, this wasn't super gruesome. And I was expecting something more gruesome, just the movie in general. And it isn't, because there's no sex. There's hardly any cursing.
I thought they handled it really well. I mean, like, I'm not a big fan of sex in movies unless the movie, like, definitely, revolves around a story about sex. But it's like, in this, it would have been like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Get the monster, like, having sex with someone out of, like, randomly nowhere? This is the, like, erotic scene, romantic candles and flowers as it's, like, humping the hell out of somebody. That just would have been awkward and weird. So I'm glad they didn't do stuff like that. And then with the blood, the gore, I thought they handled it, like I said, not too much, not too little. It was like kind of that perfect amount to where it kind of left you wanting a little bit more, but you were satisfied, like a McDonald's meal.
So we cut to 1 week later and we see a woman on a bicycle pulling up outside the museum. And I like that they hit that point home a little harder that they're in Chicago because she's wearing the Chicago Blackhawks ball cap for the hockey team.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. Like, okay, just gotta remind you, everybody. It's like, hey, by the way, we're in Chicago.
I like that though, because that's my team. That's my hockey team. I'm like, yes, Blackhawks. So then we see a school bus of kids, elementary age, unloading to go to a field trip to the museum. 2 boys who look, I'm terrible at this, maybe 12 at most.
I would have guessed around, yeah, somewhere between 12, especially because the way they act, I would say between 12 and 13-ish, because they have that
Okay.
kind of smart ass boy nature.
Yes, and they're like, well, we ditched school but we can't go to the arcade yet. So what are we going to do? And one of the kids is like, let's just jump in that tour and the field trip and go in the museum. And the other kid doesn't want to go because he's like, that's not cool enough for ditching school. And the other kid's like, what are you, scared?
Like 12 or 13, that's kind of how I was acting. Although there was a lot more swearing in what we said as kids, but like basically the same kind of attitude.
Well, it's good smart assery coming up because the woman is standing there, and because she rode her bicycle to work, she's adjusting her clothes and her outfit and getting a little more presentable to go in. And the boys are standing there just looking at her. She's all, didn't your parents teach you not to stare? And one of the kids goes, didn't yours teach you not to get dressed in public?
And that is totally something I would have said too. And I would have stared as well. At that age, I was like, the hormones are starting to come through. I've been like, oh, this is interesting.
Yes, he's not wrong. She's standing there in public. What do you expect? In fact, somebody commented something, I forget what the post was exactly on social media, about men and women staring at each other in public, or don't dress a certain way because people are going to stare at you. And I'm like, well, if you're in public, it's not that my parents didn't teach me not to stare. It's that I am making a choice to look at you. You're making a choice to stand there half naked. If you come out and check the mail in your boxers, of course I'm going to look at you. It's fair game.
Exactly. I have that same attitude for a lot of things, like women wearing revealing clothing. It's like, well, if you don't want me to look, don't wear it.
Exactly.
I'm going to look. That's naturally the way that it happens.
So someone passes by her and calls her Dr. Green. Good morning, Dr. Green. The kids are like, oh, what kind of doctor are you? And she's like, oh, I'm an evolutionary biologist. And the kids are like, like, what is that? And she goes, it's someone trying to figure out where our tails went. I was like, that's a really good, like, pared down explanation.
Oh, it was kind of like a little slap to the kids. It was like, oh, I get to be a smartass too, you little bastard.
So she's like, your teacher's going to be missing you. And the kids are like, oh, yeah, right. And they run off and join that field trip.
I like that they kind of like, the kids acted that really well with that whole, like I said, like the, oh yeah, that, because that's exactly what you kind of picture kids doing. I want to say I did that too. Of like, when you get caught in the middle of a lie, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Let's go do this.
So Dr. Green goes inside, signs in at the front desk, and we see Fred, the security guard, there and saying good morning to her. She gets stopped by Dr. Cuthbert, and this is Linda Hunt. And in this movie, I wanted to take my superpowers of knowing what hair cut and design is right for everybody. And I wanted to reach into the movie and grab Linda Hunt and fix her hair. She has the same hair in every movie.
See, that's what works for her, though, is that she's one of those actresses that she's just kind of always herself in every role she plays, but she's just so good at being herself that it works. Even her voice, like she's done some voiceover work and things.
So we do see the banners all over the museum displaying the upcoming Superstition exhibit. And here we're like, oh, okay, this is going to tie into the whole movie. I love this. And Dr. Cuthbert tells Margot that another guy, Dr. Lee, and that's Chi. I don't want to butcher his name.
Yeah, his name is, I tried pronouncing it so many times. And I'm like, I can't do this.
She lets Margot know he's applying for the same grant as she is through the Blaisdell Foundation. She gets upset. And even though it's fair game for them to apply for whatever grants they want, I do think she's right to get upset because it is kind of shitty. She points out this is the only grant that applies to what I do that I can apply for. Greg has multiple grants he can get for his department. So why is he going after mine? I am kind of on board with her. It seems kind of unethical and shitty for Dr. Lee to do that to her.
He was one of those characters that's like, there's a lot of like TV shows or movies where there's at least some point where the character that's kind of an asshole reveals a little bit of a side where you're like, okay, you know, I like this about him, or maybe he's got like a nice guy, he just had a bad childhood or something like this. This guy was just like born, bred, and raised 100% dick.
Well, I also found it weird that they can afford money, the museum, to do this. Well, we'll find out later, this big gala event opening to promote the museum, but they don't have money to keep her program going. She has to completely shut down all her work and fire her staff if she doesn't get this one grant. I was like, really, museum? You don't have a little money for her? Come on. So Dr. Cuthbert reminds Margot about that gala, like I just mentioned, which is going on 2 nights from now. And she needs to make sure she goes so she can schmooze the Blaisdells into giving her the grant money. And I like that she's the kind of no nonsense person where she's like, I just want to do my work. I don't have time to go schmooze. This is bullshit, basically, is what she's kind of giving off the attitude of. I was like, girl, I'm with you. It's bullshit. You just want to do your job. And you're going to be forced to put on your party dress and fake laugh at these people to try and get their money. That has to be annoying.
No, I would imagine it would be too. It's like there are times where you want to do your work and you don't want to have to like when I worked in retail, you know, you don't always want to have to deal with the customers. You're like, go away, you asshole. I want to go, you know, stock tampons or whatever the hell it is I'm doing at the time.
Right.
So I kind of get that. And her attitude, like everything about her in this movie, this was like the one time, and I've never watched a lot of her movies. Her hair, her eyes, the glasses she wears, the way she dresses, her attitude. I was just like, oh, Penelope Ann Miller. It's so hot.
So you have a crush on Dr. Margot is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like at first I thought it was Penelope Ann Miller, and then I saw her in a couple other things. I was like, no, it's Margot. It is totally Margot. I've got a huge crush on.
So the last thing I will say about this before we move on, it seems like we're going very slowly over a quick few minutes of movie, but it's because it's so fucking clever the way it's written and the dialogue. Linda Hunt says to her, or Dr. Cuthbert, you need to go to this party because you know Greg will be there attaching himself to the Blaisdells like a crustacean. So you can get the relationship here between Cuthbert and Margot in that one sentence. She's pulling for Margot and she knows that Greg is a slimy POS.
I think that's what's cool about Linda Hunt is that she always plays likable characters. It's like they cannot cast her as like a villain or a bad guy or anything like that. She's just always this adorable, lovable little character.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love the relationship with those two. It's just so cool.
Exactly. And that's all you need to get their relationship is just this one little interaction.
Yeah. And kind of like how you said, it's like we're taking our time pouring over this one, but it's because there's like so many freaking details in this that you just see and you're like, oh, you absorb this movie in a way. It's like you don't just watch this movie, you absorb this movie.
We say this phrase sometimes, but it's so relevant more now than ever. This movie is so much better than it has any right to be. It really is.
It really, yeah, because it feels like this should be a bad B movie, like just a horrible, but it is so good on so many levels.
Yes, and it has its flaws, which we'll get to, but there's so much more better about it that it doesn't matter how many little flaws there are. So Margot goes downstairs to the lab area now in the museum, and she confronts Greg Lee about applying for quote unquote her grant. He points out it's not her grant until she gets it. He's not wrong, but again, it doesn't seem quite ethical to me to do that to your coworker or peer. And I like that she puts him in his place a little bit by loudly saying to him as she walks away, "You really are a gerbil." So she keeps her classiness, by just calling him a gerbil instead of a piece of shit.
Again, it's that, like I said, I love Margot because yeah, it's like she should have just ripped into him, and it's like, no, I'm going to keep it classy, and I'm going to be the proper woman that I am, and just insult you in a classy way, and you're just like, oh, marry me, Margot.
So later now, Margot passes by Dr. Whitney's office and sees some open crates and starts to rummage through them. She gets startled by Dr. Cuthbert, who is there pushing Dr. Frock, who is like the head curator of the museum, in his wheelchair. And Dr. Frock is James Whitmore, who I will say is not in this movie nearly enough. I love his character.
He is so great. And then like going back and looking at IMDb and like the extensive amount of work that man has done, I can't even name here everything. We would spend the entire time naming every classic character he did. But the one thing I can point out is I love the fact that there is a connection with giant monster movies with him being in the movie Them.
Really?
Yes.
From 50.
Yeah, the 50s. I don't recall the exact date on it, but the old the sci-fi movie Them.
Oh my God. Well, you can tell he's a veteran actor because even though he's not in this a lot, his performance is stellar. It's effortless. And now a bit of the clever writing once again. In one little couple of lines here, we immediately get the relationship between Dr. Frock and Dr. Margot, because she's startled by them rummaging through these crates, and Dr. Cuthbert's like, oh, what are you doing? You know, not like getting her in trouble per se, but like questioning her. And Dr. Frock immediately jumps in. He's like, oh, I invited Margot to join us. I hope you don't mind. And he winks at Margot, like covering for it. All you need is that to know immediately that he's got a soft spot for her, maybe like a father-daughter type thing.
That was kind of the relationship I picked up too, because it was like he kind of comes off like, you know, like a father, grandfather kind of figure, is like just a really sweet old man.
Yep. And that's so clever in the writing because that's all we need. We don't need a big long exposition dump or big scene between them. That's all we need to know what they're about. So Dr. Frock hands Margot a piece of a little stone statue, and Margot sarcastically asks, so what does this god specialize in? So you can tell her scientific evolutionary biologist brain not on board with mythology, superstition, and you know, anything that Dr. Whitney is about.
Oh yeah, and I think we all have that person in our life, you know, or you are that person. There's the more religious, spiritual, superstitious kind of person, and then the more logical one is like, oh, I don't believe any of that stuff, and dismisses you all the time.
Yes, that's the perfect word for her. She's very dismissive of all of this. Dr. Frock says it's a Cathoga from a South American tribe that made a deal with the devil to vanquish their enemies. Okay, movie, I'm interested. Tell me more.
Yeah, I wanted more of the backstory of the statue and the mythology of that.
Margot rolls her eyes and asks, why do we keep financing John Whitney's expeditions as if superstition is the same thing as science? In case we weren't picking up the subtlety, she's going to flat out say it. And Dr. Cuthbert says, anthropologists are permitted to believe in myth. It's part of their job. That was a good comeback.
I did like that. It was kind of like sometimes you kind of need to smack them down politely a little bit here and there of like, okay, yeah, I get it. You don't believe in that, but this is considered an actual science. So chill the fuck out.
And then this is where we tie back to the IMDb plot when it says a homicide detective and an anthropologist try to blah, blah, blah. No, Dr. Whitney is the anthropologist. She's not. So I was kind of mad that somebody let that slide on IMDb. Come on, y'all.
But it's I sometimes IMDb, like we said, we've discussed that before. Like they either don't go too far into the plot, like, you know, very bare minimum of like, you know, hero defeats villain. So they're not always on the ball.
So she adds that the museum's superstition exhibit is excellent box office revenue for the museum, and it benefits her as well. So then that's where I went, my earlier thought is probably right. Margot she probably needs the grant to do a lot of work, but as long as the museum's making some money, she can still have a job and do what she does. Cuthbert's pointing out, we need this revenue. That's why we're doing this big exhibition. So I was like, does she really need the grant? I don't know.
To me, it's like And I'm just going off of, because I'm no museum expert or scholar or pretty much anything other than just a podcaster. But I'm assuming that a lot of them, it's ingrained in them of grant. It's kind of like with professors, it's ingrained to get tenure.
So Margot takes a few of these leaves out of the crate with the bubbles, the sushi on them. And to me, in my notes, I wrote, they look like little pink mini boba bubbles, like boba tea.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. I mean, my mind went to Tobiko, but oh yeah, boba too.
And then one of them, Cuthbert or somebody, calls it maybe a fungus, or they don't know what it is. So she decides to take some for analysis. They decide that it's probably best if they burn all of the rest of the leaves and the crates just to be safe, because we don't know what this fungus is on the leaves. My concern was, but she's handling them and you're all breathing it, and she's going to take some back to her office. Now you're worried about contamination?
That's kind of a good point. It's like, okay, maybe you guys should have had the hazmat team come in immediately to kind of like shut the place down and, oh, okay, is this like a deadly virus or fungus, or like, what is this exactly? But no, okay, I'm going to take a leaf and then we can just burn the rest of the shit, whatever.
And then we cut to a shot of all of the rest of the leaves and crates being tossed into an incinerator, which I just assume is in the basement somewhere. The museum closes now and it's after dark. We see inside the two boys that had ditched school are locked inside the museum. They're wandering around. What are we supposed to do now? We're stuck. We're going to get in trouble. And the other kid's like, oh, what are you, scared? Back at the other kid. And they decide they're going to wander around and go into a stairwell. So then we get a shot of the security guard, Fred, going into the restroom for a quick break. And I'm guessing he's going to smoke the marijuana.
That is the marijuana. I partake a little bit myself, and that is indeed the marijuana.
Okay. I just assumed, because I think later a cop calls it a joint, and I was like, oh, okay. So he's in the stall, and we hear some weird wheezing, heavy breathing noise, which is super effective and super freaky. I love it.
Yeah, I absolutely freaking loved the sound of it. I think we discussed in Pumpkinhead, sometimes like the atmosphere of the music or the sound of the creature or whatever, that stuff can really suck you in to the movie. And I loved that so much. Like, they did a great job with him.
We get a really cool music sting that just shocks you, and he gets pulled by a monster hand. It's so quick, down and under the stall, and he screams, and that's all she wrote for poor Fred.
And I want to point out two things. One, I've got to get the joke in because that's who I am. Scenes like this in all horror movies, whenever you go into the bathroom and then something reaches out from like underneath and grabs you, this is exactly why I cannot use public bathrooms to this day. Like, that's like one of my greatest fears in life is I don't want to take a shit, and just like the last thing that happens is I get pulled out of the bathroom stall and get eaten alive by some freaky creature.
I do like every once in a while, like my old hair salon had this, where the stalls are like cement floor, like walls and flooring, and it goes all the way from floor to ceiling. Even the door, whatever heavy stuff it's made out of, again, floor to ceiling, there's no openings.
That would be perfect, because do you feel safe then?
Yeah.
It's like this is like one of the most vulnerable positions for a human being, is to be sitting on the can, and like anything in the world can happen to you. And it's like not just like vulnerable, but it's also like you don't want to die in the bathroom. That's embarrassing. I mean, Elvis had that happen, and that was probably like freaky for him.
Toilets and showers, when you're the most vulnerable. I mean, the worst thing that could happen to you is when you're sitting on the toilet is you get a shark attack.
Yeah, I've always worried about that. Like, the worst thing, that thing come up out of the toilet and just bite you in the ass. Spiders too. Oh, spiders on the toilet. Oh,
I know. I have a habit because of that. I've seen like YouTube videos and shit of like real life, not from movies, where spiders are in the toilet. So I always flush. I do a courtesy flush before I actually sit down to make sure anybody in there gets washed away.
Yeah, I'll lift the lid. I'll do everything. I'm like, I don't want anything biting me on the ass unless I'm paying like $400 an hour for it. Okay, I do also want to point out a little bit of trivia. I don't think you caught it.
Sure.
Fred, the security guard, played by Joffrey C. Brown. I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Interesting twist. First victim that we see on screen in this movie. In Jurassic Park, he is the first victim of a velociraptor as well.
Really?
Yeah, I caught that on IMDb, and so I went and looked it up. And he's the animal handler that gets attacked by the velociraptor.
That's hysterical.
That's
his claim to fame. He's like, I get killed immediately.
And of course it also, relives the trope that Black people always die in the first 5 minutes of every horror movie.
Oh my God. Yeah, he doesn't deserve what he gets here, but for just smoking the marijuana on the job, but he gets it.
No, because I would totally be doing the same thing if I worked that job.
So Margot begins to run analysis of that fungus that she found on the leaves. And we get a quick cut. A lot of this movie does cut a lot, which I've complained about in other movies. In this movie, I argue it works because we don't need a lot. We just need a quick cut to show me what's happening. And then let's cut back to something else happening somewhere else. I don't need to be lingering on people walking from point A to point B. Give me a quick cut just to show me where you're at. I like it in this movie. It keeps the pace fast.
It does. Yeah, it's a trick. If it's done right, it works really well. And they did a good job with this movie. Like I said, it goes so smoothly and so quickly that before you realize it, the movie's over and you're like, you want to watch it again.
Yeah. So we get the quick cut of the boys in the stairwell and they hear that wheezing, scary sound of whatever's making that noise. And they freak out and they start to run and we cut away. We see Margot, her staff is leaving for the night and she's alone. She goes out to the main hall to the front desk and she's going to sign out, but the guard's not there. We know why. He done bit it. And what cracked me up is she knows the routine. She's been here for years. We find out later. She's seen Fred every day for however many years he's been there. She knows he's there doing his rounds or whatever. She's signing out and she hears a noise. And so because it's a horror movie, they have her look up and go, hello, is someone there? Really? It's probably Fred doing his rounds. Calm down, bitch. They do that for our benefit because it's a horror movie, I think.
At the same time, there are times where I kind of I don't think I've ever said who's there, but that's just mainly because I come from the old school thought of like, I don't want someone like responding back to me when I know there's nobody there, because that's going to freak me out even more. Like,
who's there?
Oh,
me, the killer.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was just going to say.
Cut to the next day outside the museum, the banners promoting the superstition exhibit. There's a whole bunch. So if you'd missed it up until now, you're really going to get it. Police have rolled up and shut the museum down. Lieutenant D'Augusta pulls up and sees the superstition banner, and we just get that quick shot of him going, oh, that's terrific.
He doesn't even have to say anything sometimes. Just the look on his face, and he's just like, what he's thinking. I love that about him in this movie. So
I cracked up at this. I unfortunately could not get captioning on this viewing on this disc.
Yeah, I couldn't either. So it wasn't just me then. It was you didn't have captioning.
I don't think the disc has it, the DVD. I had to crank it up really loud and like back it up a couple times to catch, because they kind of talk really quietly in some scenes. Hollingsworth is walking with D'Augusta and he says, hang on to your fucking hat, as they're going to go inside. And I'm like, so he's already been inside and seen the crime scene, I guess. Also, D'Augusta is homicide. I'm sure he's seen shit like this before. Why is it hang on to your fucking hat? It's not that bad.
I don't know anything about like Chicago homicide, but I imagine it probably being pretty bad. So yeah, he's probably seen worse.
So he tells Hollingsworth, I want to interview everybody, whether they worked here yesterday or not. Hollingsworth tells him the last person to sign out yesterday was Dr. Margot. Then we see Dr. Green. Well, yeah, Dr. Margot, Dr. Green, whatever, pulls up, and Greg Lee is outside and tells her someone was murdered. And he smirks and jokes about it and says he thinks it was Colonel Mustard with the candlestick.
I love the scene. Not even like the ridiculousness of the line, but the way he says it is so great. I love his accent. Basically, it just makes his character even just more believable as just like this douchey guy.
That's a good word for him. So Margot then gets escorted inside by a police officer. We see the two little boys sitting there with their parents. D'Augusta says he wants detailed statements from the kids. Then he tells Dr. Green he'll catch up with her later for her interview because he's busy right now. And she's like standing there going, well, what am I supposed to do while I'm waiting on you? I want to go to my lab. He mentions to her, you can't go to your lab because that's the basement level and everything is cut off right now. So I thought that was weird that there's a death right here where they're standing, but yet you've cut off the basement level. Why? But that's what they do.
The only thing I could figure was maybe it's got something to do with like, okay, they search everything, so like everything is cut off. I don't know. I know nothing about police procedure.
The thing I was trying to understand was in a typical homicide murder situation, which I am no police officer. I don't know any personally. However, I've seen enough TV and movies and even some reality shows to know that the person that committed this murder, if it's just a random killer, they're probably not hanging out the next day at the crime scene. Probably not.
More than likely not. The only thing I can figure is that this one is because the building is so big that maybe, he couldn't get out. Like they're thinking maybe he couldn't get out and is hiding somewhere in the building still.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Well, yeah, it's like they wouldn't shut it down like that, I don't think.
So DeGusta goes around the corner right there and into the men's room where the dead body is. Inside, forensics are photographing the body. DeGusta asks Hollingsworth, "Does this look familiar to you?" And he's like, "Yep." And for a second, I'm like, huh? And then it clicks. Oh, the boat bodies.
I had the same thought. Same thing with me with every time I watch it too. It's not even the first time I watched it. Every viewing of this movie, I forget about the boat and then that and the connection.
So a cop says to DeGusta, "I never thought there was a worse way to die than a shark attack. Having your head ripped off never occurred to me." That's good. That's funny.
It is. It is. I like that. And it makes you think too, because how many people actually do think about like decapitation on a day-to-day basis? Oh yeah, today would be a really bad day to get decapitated.
Yeah, you would think, I can avoid a shark attack if I don't go in the water where there's sharks, but decapitation apparently can get you anywhere.
Exactly.
You're never safe from a decapitation.
Thank you for bringing a new fear into my life.
So the door is wide open. Margot comes around the corner, screams when she sees everything. And I'm like, why didn't a cop stop her? There was like 3 of them in the hall right there that grab her as she's screaming. Why didn't they stop her from going around the corner? So the night guard's head now we see has been ripped off and his head's over here and his body's over there. Claw marks on the body and there is blood everywhere. Like the guy was doing a Jackson Pollock up in here with this guy's blood. It's a lot of blood. And they do say something about we need to get blood splatter analysis. And I was like, oh, Dexter.
That damn show. Like I just now, every time I see blood spatter analysis, I'm like, oh, Dexter, same exact thing. And if I remember right, I thought like you saw the brain too. Like the brain wasn't even in the head or something.
It was sitting on the floor.
Yeah, so it's like it was a really gruesome scene, but like not overly gory, like just gruesome enough to you kind of be like, ugh, but not like, holy crap, I'm not going to be able to eat spaghetti and meatballs ever again.
Yeah, this is where the R rating clearly, a brain on the floor. That's pretty bad.
Oh yeah.
So DeGusta notices a broken mirror and we just see him wince as he looks at it. And because we've already laid the groundwork, we know he's bothered by the broken mirror because of his superstition.
Sometimes that stuff will get annoying to me in movies. I don't know if it's the same way with you. They'll keep bringing up a character trait for a character and they'll do it so much that you're just like, all right, movie, I kind of get it. They did this one so subtly that it's like, it doesn't bother you. You're just like a little reminder here and there. And you're like, oh yeah, I like that about him. It like helps you connect to him.
Yes. And it's different every time.
Yeah.
First it was the cat. Now it's the mirror. Like it's not the same thing being thrown in our face.
Yeah, I think maybe that's what helps it, is that it's never the same superstition. It's always something a little bit different. It's almost like you're kind of like going through every superstition.
And then, right as we're saying this, Hollingsworth is about to step over the body and he says, no, don't do that. It's bad luck to step over a dead body.
And that one I remember because I remember my mom and my brother telling me when we would go to like graveyards to visit, family members and stuff like that. And it was a tradition my grandmother said of like, you do not step over the body of the grave. You had to walk down the little aisles and stuff like that. And so when he did that, it clicked in my mind of like, oh yeah, I remember that.
So DeGusta tells a cop outside the bathroom, you need to take teams of 2 and sweep every floor in the building. And we are not reopening until every room has been cleared. And then you're like, oh, okay. He's just being a good cop. He's being very thorough, like he's erring on the side of caution. And I can appreciate that. Okay. So he asks Hollingsworth, what does a museum guard have to do with a drug hit on a South American ship? I like that. We're talking for the audience to try and think this through. Like, how is this all connected?
it seemed like such a ridiculous connection that a cop would not think that. Because yeah, it's like, especially a drug hit, no one, there's not going to be a drug hit over marijuana.
So next, D'Agusta finds Dr. Cuthbert and then a man standing out in the main hall. We learn he is the head of security. We learn that they don't have security cameras that record everything. What? How do you have the Field Museum of Natural History and all these valuables and you don't have a recording security system?
That is, I mean, okay, that does bother me, but I'm kind of thinking about it now, like, okay, this is 97, I believe.
Yeah.
So I don't remember how many buildings had security cameras like in every single place. I don't remember when they started putting that shit in. Like now it's like, yeah, this movie's made today and you hear that line, you're like, okay, this is unbelievable. There's going to be security cameras like in the toilet, for God's sakes.
Yeah, I know. I was shocked at that revelation of but I was like, okay, that's fine. So he does mention to Dr. Cuthbert that opening for the gala 2 nights from now might not be an option. She's upset by that, which, yeah, especially if you rely on the income from this big event.
You know, bringing that up, I've noticed, because there's a couple of times in this movie that I caught connections. Like, I don't think blatant connections are like, you know, like they meant to do it between certain movies. There was a definite Jaws feel to some of this stuff that happened in this movie. And I didn't really catch it until this viewing. The whole gala thing, oh, it depends on, you know, we got to bring in the money from this and the monster, all the stuff going on. You're kind of like,
don't
shit.
Close the beaches.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, holy shit, dude, this is Jaws. Like the security officer, like, dude, you're totally the fucking mayor from Jaws.
He is a bit of a dick.
He is.
So down in the labs, people are getting back to work slowly, and there is still a police presence down there, which again, a little subtle touch I appreciated. D'Agusta goes to see Dr. Green. He walks in. She's like, I can't stop working. I have to go deliver this. So I hope you want to walk with me. So they take off on a little jaunt, and we realize, again, this movie being super clever, instead of them standing in a room dumping exposition for no good reason, there's a purpose to it and there's a pace. They just start walking. And he's rapid firing things to her. She's explaining stuff to him. They pass a large maceration tank, which just honestly looks like a big dumpster. And it's filled with a liquid. And she jokes with the guy, hey, what's the soup today?
I love the corny museum humor in this that they throw out sometimes. You're just like, ugh.
Yeah. And Margot explains that means they take skinned animal bones and they throw them into the tank. And in this case, it's rhinoceros. The liquid makes the skin fall off the bones. And then they give the bones to the beetles and they clean all the meat off the bones. They pick every last bit off. And then they even show a guy lifting some rib bones like out of the beetle tank or whatever, it looks like a little aquarium, and they're covered in beetles. And I was like, oh, that's so smart to like get your bones cleaned of the meat and stuff, the flesh.
It was such a cool thing. It's like this is a movie that actually made me want to work in a freaking museum. Like it just seemed like this is so awesome.
Like I want to do sciencey stuff. This is rad.
I do, but of course I'm easily swayed. Any movie I watch, I instantly want to become like what's in the movie. Like Darkman, I wanted to become a drug dealer and then like wrap myself in bandages and start running in the streets.
A lab assistant now, the one who's pulling the bones out, tells Margot, watch out because this lid was left open last night and some beetles got out. There's like 500 little beetles in this aquarium, and you're telling me they all didn't try to escape? I found that weird and a little convenient for the story, but I let it slide because this movie's awesome.
Well, I mean, maybe it's like that was the scout. He's going out to like find out like the way to get out of the building and like how they get. So they sent him out first, and he was going to come back with the information.
That makes more sense.
Again, my logic kicks in.
So D'Agusta apologizes to Margot. This scene, this little bit bothers me because he apologizes to her for her having to see the crime scene. And she says, you could have closed the door. I had to say hi to that man every day, blah, blah, blah. Like, really, bitch? Really? First of all, those cops should have stopped her from going around the corner. Second of all, it's not his fault. Why is he apologizing? And C, she should have just known better not to do that, not to go around the corner. Like, what the hell?
Okay. First off, I will forgive you for insulting the woman who has my heart. But okay, yeah, no, that is a good point. She did kind of come off a little bitchy right there, but I kind of took it to like, okay, well, it was stress. She's got a lot of stress going on with the grant and everything, and then she does see the dead body. But yeah, I was kind of like, I do hate that when you get a character who does something they know they shouldn't have done and then gets pissy at the other people for like them doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, what the hell was the problem with you?
So she sees a penny on the floor and she goes to pick it up, and DaCosta stops her and says, "Don't pick it up if it's face down because that's bad luck." And I like her response, though, her comeback. She picks it up and she goes, "Sorry, but around here, every penny counts."
I do. That was pretty good. I like that. And there's times where even I will break my superstition.
So they continue this little bit of exposition dumping as they tour the basement. Margot takes DaGusta to a caged storage area, tells him this is one of 6 that houses the collection for the museum. She further explains that the museum has about 3 million specimens, and the exhibition areas that are open to the public actually only display about 2% of what the museum owns. I found that wildly fascinating.
I did too. The one thing I do wonder though is how much of that was, because obviously the script was written before they filmed in this location. So how much of that was them basically talking about the Museum of Natural History in New York and not Chicago, but they just didn't change it? Because I know the Museum of Natural History is fucking huge.
I just would assume in general, those numbers are probably pretty close across the board. All museums probably only have a tiny percent of actual exhibition space.
Oh yeah, the local museum we have in the next like city over, Carson. I've been there, and I've actually been behind the scenes because my mom knew someone who was married to a guy that worked there. So I got to go behind the scenes a couple of times and like look at everything. And it is kind of like that. There is like a lot of stuff that you don't kind of have out in the exhibit because you don't have the space or whatever.
So in these little cages, we see that there's multiple levels and there's a staircase inside that takes you up. But then we also see there's like a mini freight elevator for sending the goods up and down, which made sense to me because at first I was like, oh, that's going to be convenient later in the movie, throwback, But you wouldn't want to be carrying super valuable stuff up and down the stairs, like just in case you might drop it.
Yeah,
so I was like, that makes sense that they would have that.
Yeah. Plus, if it's really heavy or something, you can't carry it up and down. So it does make sense. Or if you're just like lazy as shit, you just don't want to take the stairs.
And so then again, we get a little throwaway line. But if you're paying attention, you're like, oh, that's going to come back later. DaGusta just quickly comments, well, this doesn't seem like a good place to light a match.
This movie is so excellent at foreshadowing and like setting up little things here and there. You're just like, oh, very clever movie. You're very clever.
But it's not so in your face that you're like, oh, brother. It's just this little quick throwaway. So DaGusta asks Dr. Margot now, how well do you know John Whitney? Because his office was vandalized last night. Then we cut away. We have DaGusta entering Dr. Whitney's office with Dr. Margot in tow. Margot says she has no idea what could have been so important in his office that somebody would want it so badly as to trash his office. She points out he's in Brazil, but he did have crates that came in yesterday. One of them had a smashed relic and the other was empty. And then I had to remember that in the scene with her and Cuthbert and Frock, they just assume that all of those leaves with the fungus are packing leaves and that he put all the packing leaves in there, but forgot to put an actual product, a thing to be shipped.
Again, it's like also it's great foreshadowing, kind of leading you up to something that's like, oh, okay, does this mean something later? And
I just wish she would have said she wouldn't have said nothing. She would have said leaves, a bunch of leaves. It wasn't nothing in the crate. It wasn't empty.
But I mean, she is kind of like, even though, she does capture my heart and everything and other parts of my body. I could see her thinking like, well, packing materials are nothing. Like, okay, well, if you get like a box of packing peanuts, you're going to be like, oh, there was nothing in it. You're not going to say like, oh, there was packing peanuts in it. Did we miss the line? I think it was when Cuthbert, Margot, and Frock, when they were talking about the ballet.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I want to go back. I love that line when you're talking about like the topless ushers at the bullshit. And like Dr. Fox, like, well, if they did that, I would go too. I literally said when I watched that, I was like, hell yeah, dude, I'd be going too. It was like such a great little throwaway joke line. I just wanted to throw that in real quick.
No, I agree. It's one of those, this movie has a lot of them, just little bits of quick humor. So they go to the restoration department now and see that this broken relic from Dr. Whitney is being reassembled and restored. Margot tells D'Augusta the stone is a chimera, which is a combination of creatures that superstitious people see as God or enemy. Then he gets a beep on his beeper, beep, 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 a page, and says, here's my card. Call me if you think of anything else. And he runs off. I laughed. I was like, ooh, okay, that dates the movie.
It does. It does. In fact, the other night, me and a friend of mine were having a conversation about her kids, and they were watching a movie from the 90s, and they brought up beepers, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember beepers. I just watched something with beepers as well.
D'Augusta goes to the morgue now to see about the guard's autopsy. This scene is not long enough because this has my favorite character in the movie. We meet the doctor here, and she's played by Audra Lindley, who passed away October of 97, so a few months after this movie was released. She was Mrs. Roper on the sitcom Three's Company with John Ritter from the 70s.
Oh, see, I didn't see her face, so
you can't see her face because she's
Okay, yeah, I love Mrs. Roper. She was so funny. I loved that show.
This character and the way she is in this movie, written and her lines and how she's acting, reminded me so much of the doctor, well, an animal doctor of some kind, shows up in Jaws 2, the whale lady.
Okay.
When they find the beached whale that had a shark took a bite out of him, and Brody's there, and they just have a brief scene of her explaining stuff to him. It's snarky and funny and witty, and you're like, I love this lady, and then she never comes back. This was the same way for me. I love this character.
I love this, like the smartass nature.
So we also get immediately, in a really funny, fun way, the relationship. We know she knows D'Augusta because he's homicide. He's clearly interacts with her a lot because when she's getting ready to start the autopsy, she's making small talk with him, and she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I heard about the custody hearing. I guess it doesn't pay to be late on your Alpo payments."
You want to see, like, I would love to have seen them spin this off into like a TV series and like have her show up every episode as he's investigating murders, because they're
right.
It works so well together.
7 decapitations in 1 week. Don't you just hate someone who only takes head and never gives it?
You're bad, Matilda. Real bad.
Autopsy attended by Lieutenant Vincent DeCosta, Chicago homicide. I heard your ex got custody of the dog.
What's on the goddamn internet?
You shouldn't have been late on your Alpo payments.
So she remarks about the body and starts the autopsy. She says that this is 7 decapitations in 1 week. So I'm assuming she worked on the ones from the boat as well. And I like that she just comments, and it's on the record, they record autopsy. She comments, "Don't you just hate someone who only takes head and never gives it?"
I was hoping, like, if you don't say that line, I'm totally saying that line because I love that.
So good.
And this makes it so much better now that I know this is Mrs. Roper saying all this shit. I'm just like, now I'll go back and watch Three's Company and be like, oh, you dirty bitch.
So as she's doing the autopsy, she notes that Lieutenant D'Augusta is there, and which I was like, oh, that's a little touch to procedure, like they didn't have to throw in. But this movie's really good at trying to give you by the book stuff. So she's talking her way through describing all the wounds. The security guard's body is there. We see what she's doing. And I guess R rating again, because she reaches into the cavity of his head. The hole in his head. She notes that it's been punched in and something removed, which would be the brain, obviously, because she weighs the brain. And she notes, wow, that's weird. And D'Augusta's like, what? And she goes, well, the brain, it's light, even for a man. I was like, yes, I love her. I can't say it enough. In movies, usually I don't love a coroner that's got jokes, but this one works.
It's sometimes I think they make the jokes a little too creepy, or they make them a little bit too, it just doesn't feel natural. But yeah, with her, it's like the jokes were funny. They weren't like mistimed or anything. And I think it helped with the working relationship between D'Augusta and then I don't remember if they said the other guy's name that was working with her, was assisting her. Was it Jerry?
No, Jerry's the dog.
That's right, Jerry's
that he didn't get custody of.
I cannot remember the name of the guy that was working with her, but I liked him too because he's so silent.
Oh, it was hysterical because the whole time he doesn't say a peep. And then she explains to D'Agusta the thalamic region of his brain is missing, as well as the pituitary gland. She further explains the missing parts actually regulate hormones in the human body. And then she looks over at her assistant. She goes, "Wouldn't you agree?" And the guy goes, "Yes." She's like, "Oh, he never shuts up."
This is that whole scene. Oh, I just love that scene. It just cracks me up. I love it.
The thalamus and hypothalamus regulate body temperature, blood pressure, heartbeat. It regulates hundreds of hormones into the bloodstream. Don't you agree, Fred?
Yes.
He never shuts up.
It's such a fun way to give us the little bit of like sciencey stuff that we need to know to understand the plot of the movie. So we cut to Dr. Margot in her lab getting the results of her fungus analysis. She notes out loud for us that it's loaded with animal hormones. Okay, learning a little more as we go here. Then we see a lone beetle, our rogue scout beetle from earlier, getting put into the box with the fungus leaves. As Margot doesn't notice, she seals it up and puts it in the fridge for overnight. My question was, why was it sitting out in the leaves, spilled out on the table like that? If they're possibly contagions. That was a sticking point for me.
Okay, the only explanation I have is because most of the women I've known in my life are either their house or room is a complete disaster and a mess, and their car is completely clean, or it's the complete opposite. The car is a mess and the house is completely clean. She's one of those people. Her office is a complete disaster, but I'm sure her apartment, spick and span.
So later, D'Agusta calls Hollingsworth, and I love this because it's a quick little scene. He's outside on a phone, tells him to get the autopsy reports from the other bodies from the ship and check for missing parts of the brain. But I like that he just quickly ends the phone call by going, "How the fuck does anyone get custody of a dog?" Like, he's just not going to get over this. He's so upset.
It's like a running gag throughout the movie. And it just like every time it comes up, you love it. And you feel bad for him too, because you just
yes.
Like, oh.
So we see now that a cop is stationed in the lab, like a guard. Again, police presence. I like that little touch. As Margot's leaving, she passes by this really cool looking entrance for the superstition exhibit up in the main hall. And she decides that she's going to go in for a peek because nobody's around to tell her no.
Which is like, that's the first thing you want to do. Like, okay, someone's been killed in the museum, and what are you going to do? Oh, let's go explore while there's nobody else around.
And I thought, yeah, why even bother? Because you're someone who has consistently rolled your eyes and made snarky comments about superstition the entire movie up to this point. Why do you even care, really, what's in the exhibit? So it's all dark, of course. We see a really cool display of ladders that you walk under, open umbrellas, black cats, even a giant salt shaker with a big pile of spilled salt. Like, it's really neat looking, actually.
No, they did a good job with the design of that. Like, if that was like a real exhibit, I would definitely go check that out because it was cool.
So she gets to a more lit room with mummies and Egyptian themed stuff. The walls shift and move, and she goes through to a jungle area. And I like that it even has like the jungle soundtrack still playing overhead, like animal noises and stuff. She passes a tribal display, but she gets startled when she hears that heavy breathing, wheezing sound that we know is the monster. She panics, of course, when she hears this, and she runs out of the exhibit and into a restroom to hide.
My first thought was like a joke that she was doing that. I was like, oh my God, she's getting stalked by Darth Vader. But then it's like when she goes into the bathroom, you're like, oh shit, there's like a callback to the security guard's death. Like the movie's trying to sucker you in to be like, oh, is Margot going to die now?
And it's super tense. Like when she's in the exhibit, it takes a little bit of time for her to wander through and then get scared and run out. And it's actually a really well-balanced, tense scene.
The pacing was really good. Like the music kind of builds the tension, like you said, and just the camera angles and everything kind of helped make this like, yeah, it almost felt like when she's going through the exhibit, like claustrophobic, because like the shots were kind of tight and everything felt like you were in this tight space with her.
Yes, agreed. So the tension is still there as she's hiding in a stall. The music comes to this feverish pitch. And then we see, as she's peeking through the stall, the cleaning lady comes in and takes a couple of puffs on her inhaler. And that was the wheezing sound that she heard.
The two issues I have with this are, one, my brother has asthma, so I know exactly what it's like, and there's no way the breathing is going to sound like that. And two, what is this poor old woman with asthma doing cleaning this whole big ass friggin' museum? Like, I felt terrible for her.
So the next day, we see the red carpet being rolled out front, getting ready for the big gala. Lieutenant D'Augusta goes into the bustling museum and chats with Dr. Cuthbert. She tells him that the gala raises a lot of money and it's really important that we have it. We've got to be open by then. He tells her he's hoping to catch this crazy killer before tonight so that the party can go on. I was a little annoyed by that because I was like, first of all, A, damn, that's fast police work. And B, the killer would probably be gone by now, right? A couple days later, got what he wanted, killed whoever and left. Like, the fuck?
Yeah, like, okay, you could see the first night excuse. Okay, maybe he was locked in to the museum, could not get out, so he was stuck. Sweep it, you can't find him. He's not going to be there. He's going to have left by then. But, we got to suspend belief because it's a movie.
So we cut to two police officers searching what appears to be an underground area full of pipes. And I thought, is this like a sub basement area? Like, what is this?
It's the sewer system for the Chicago base of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, I thought I saw Leonardo. So they're following a map and they find some bloody footprints. And I like how one of them jokes, come out wherever you are. Like the killer's going to pop out and be like, okay, you got me.
Pop out and be like, all right, guys. All right. I tried, but here I am.
So back in the main hall, Hollingsworth finds D'Augusta, tells him that he checked on those autopsies and the heads that were recovered were indeed missing their hypothalamus as well.
Now, hypothalamus is the word I was referencing. We are officially at, I don't remember where they're going to say it, but I counted at least 12 times this word has been mentioned throughout this movie.
I believe you. It's a lot. So we fade into the underground tunnels and we hear that crazy wheezing breathing sound that indicates it's our monster. We see a little bit of the creature's skin and some of the body, hardly anything. It's real dark. And then it runs up the stairs and into a tunnel. And you do get to see that it has a long tail. So you don't get to see much here, but a tease enough to get me excited.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that they kind of built it up. And this is, again, where it comes back to another, and this is like a not even a meaningful reference to Jaws, like not like they purposely did this. But when I was doing the research, they said a lot of times the reason you don't see the monster until like towards the end of the movie, like the big reveal, is because they were having trouble getting the designs done and getting like the suit finished and stuff, which again goes back to Jaws with all the technical difficulties on Bruce. So many connections.
So we cut to an auditorium where Dr. Margot is rehearsing her grant pitch. D'Augusta shows up, follows her out into the hall, asks her if she can tell him anything else about Dr. Whitney, to which she says she can't, but she does know someone who can. So she takes him down to Dr. Frock's office. And I was so excited. I'm like, yes, another scene with him. Thank you. So he gets some great lines in this scene, Dr. Frock. He and D'Augusta shake hands. And I like that immediately Dr. Frock says, so how goes the extinction of the human race? And D'Augusta says, well, I'm doing what I can to keep it orderly.
Those two work so well together. I wanted to see more movies with them together.
Right? A lot of these characters, I could watch another movie with them. So Margot says that they're kindred spirits because the lieutenant is very superstitious. And I like how he just immediately claps back with, well, I don't know about very. And as the audience, we're like, oh, bitch, yes, very.
Oh, yeah. No, even I'm not that superstitious.
Dr. Frock tells the lieutenant they recovered an artifact that Dr. Whitney had shipped from Brazil just yesterday. And I was like, just yesterday? What? It was at least 2 days ago or 3. So that timeline is off. So shame on the continuity person for this script.
Okay, yeah, I didn't catch that.
Shame,
yeah,
shame.
I feel bad now because now that he's got you on his ass, it's like he's so.
Hey, some men don't complain about that. So the lieutenant asks if the tribe that Dr. Whitney was studying in Brazil has any rituals that include ripping out the human hypothalamus. Take a drink.
This may have been 3 or 4.
So then we cut to the cops in the sewer tunnels and they call for backup, but they can't get anyone on the radio because down there, apparently these CB radio deals don't work, right? Maybe the concrete walls or they're far underground.
Yeah, it's because it's the same thing with internet connection. Like if you ever notice, like with ours, of like the further away the computer can be from the Wi-Fi, interference between metallic objects, concrete, and various things. So I think it's the same thing with like that kind of radio.
Well, they set us up here, and there's, like I said, only a handful of things in this movie that I can pick apart. This is one of them. The radio here isn't working, and it's painfully obvious. Like, oh, they're fucked. They can't get a hold of anybody. They get startled by what seems to be a homeless man, and they blast him full of lead. Just pow, 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 like no holds barred. Then we cut to D'Augusta and Hollingsworth and some other cops now down there at this scene, saying that this guy was a convicted rapist, also suspected in other murders, and he fits the description from the 2 boys. That confused me. I was like, really? I thought they didn't see anything in that stairwell, but I don't know.
I'm going to chalk it up to just boys lying to cover their ass. You know, they don't want to like come off as like scaredy cats, but also get in trouble.
So they find an axe in this guy's little hidey hole that he's been staying in. And even though Hollingsworth is sure that this is their guy, D'Augusta says something just doesn't feel right. And I'm like, oh, I like that. I like when the cop has like their gut instinct. They're like, it doesn't all line up still. I don't care.
This is one of my issues with it because we're talking about the axe and like, oh, the murder weapon and stuff like that. It's like, okay, you're cops. You guys should know the difference between getting beheaded by an axe and what blatantly looks like having your head ripped from your body.
Yeah, the forensics people should have explained that to them, cause of death and how. And yeah,
because it's like an axe is going to leave totally different marks than having it physically ripped off.
And they do say that they found the security guard's wallet in this man's possessions, and he had some of the security guard's blood on him. Now, for me, I'm like, well, duh. He went up for whatever reason in the middle of the night, found the dead body and looted him, took his wallet. Of course, he got blood on him. The blood was everywhere.
Oh, yeah. So it's like everything is logically picked apart. For once, we're actually on the same page here.
Yes. So what cracks me up is the head of security pokes his head around down here and he says to D'Augusta, it's an open and shut case. Obviously, this is your guy. What do you need? A videotape? Yeah, that'd be helpful, asshole. Too bad you don't have any in your museum, you dumb fucker.
Yeah, that would have been perfect. Especially that would have been a great comeback. Yeah, maybe you guys should put security cameras in and this wouldn't happen again.
This is nuts that they don't have a system like that. Anyway, they argue back and forth now, D'Augusta and this head of security guy, whether or not the gala will be going on tonight. A cop then shows D'Augusta a necklace from a person who was on the boat from Brazil, found in this dead guy's little hidey hole. And Hollingsworth says, this has to be our guy. He's from the ship, clearly. He has the axe, open and shut case. Just then, the head of security calls D'Augusta over to a phone on the wall. How does this phone work in this sub-level? It must be wired, hardwired, but I thought that's weird that they'd have a phone way down here. It's a call from the mayor. So this guy, all I could hear in my head when he's all, D'Augusta, come here, somebody wants to talk to you, is that this asshole went over to the phone and called the mayor and was like, man, he's not going to let us open tonight. And I hear Mr. Brady in my head, Mike Brady, saying, now, Cindy, nobody likes a tattletale. Like this little bitch ran and called the mayor
No, and what makes it even worse is that smug little smile on his face of like that shit eater's grin of it's like, oh, you little bastard.
So the mayor we see is walking around getting ready, putting on his tux and cufflinks and whatnot, and he's on speakerphone and he's talking to DeGusta. He tells the lieutenant the gala will be happening tonight by basically saying something like, let's talk about this phone call for a second.
This phone call is amazing. I love this phone call.
He talks about his friends, the Blaisdells, who will be very disappointed if they can't go tonight. I was like, oh, got it, Mayor. The rich people, they're all buddies. He talks about, have you seen my wife's cleavage? To the lieutenant. He's like, my wife has this dress that shows off her cleavage. Have you seen my wife's cleavage?
They did an epic job of building up his wife's cleavage to the point that when she shows up, you're like, where are these tits?
You're like waiting for the cleavage.
Exactly. And I was so disappointed. I've never been so disappointed in tits in my entire life.
Hey, same. I was waiting. I was like, oh, these must be some epic boobs. I can't wait to see this. And it just made me laugh that he ends the phone call by saying, DeGusta doesn't really get to get much in. And he just goes, oh, great. I'm glad we're on the same page. I'm so happy we'll be having this gala. See you later. Click, and like hangs up. Like doesn't even give DeGusta the chance to say no.
The guy playing the mayor was awesome. I absolutely loved him.
Robert Lesser as Mayor Owen. He's fantastic. And Diane Robin as the mayor's wife, who does not have epic cleavage, I hate to say.
Does not, and I don't even think she gets barely of a word in edgewise in the entire movie. She's basically a figure there. But he did a great job. I loved the mayor in this movie so much.
Yes, it's like all of the ancillary characters. They don't need a lot for you to very much enjoy their presence on screen. They're not annoying. You're happy they're there. They're funny. They're contributing. It's good stuff.
Yeah, no, there's like, this is one of those few movies where there's no such thing as a bad character in the whole movie.
So as DeGusta hangs up, like you just said, that security guard there is right in the shot with the most smug look on his face. I wanted to slap it right off his face.
I literally wrote down that smug look on the museum. I said director because I caught what he, but on his face made me want to smack him. I said the same thing.
He's so fucking smarmy. We're not supposed to like him, I don't think.
No. And they did, again, amazing casting. They cast a great actor to pull that role off because you hated him.
So the lieutenant leans into his little smug face and says, I'm going to clear all personnel and museum wings, and I'm only opening the central exhibition hall, and I'm going to maintain police presence throughout. I was like, yes, mic drop. You may have to force me to do this by tattling to the mayor, but we're going to do it my way.
Again, it's like DeGusta is so great because it's always getting back. It's like you cannot get one up on him.
So he tells Hollingsworth that even though they already had dogs come in and sweep the area, they want to bring in more dogs and sweep again. And he and Hollingsworth are going to do it themselves just to be sure. And I was like, okay, I can respect that. So back up in her lab, Margot finds the beetle that was stuck in the fungus leaves is now the size of a large textbook that she uses to smash it. And the green guts and goo go everywhere. It's so gross. I love it.
It actually reminded me, and I just now thought of it. It reminded me from a scene in one of my favorite Godzilla movies, Godzilla 1985, where they're on the ship and there's this big beetle like thing that pops out. And it looks exactly almost like the same beetle in the Relic. Simple, like I think animatronics probably, but it's so cool looking.
Did they smash it the same way in Godzilla with a giant textbook?
He stabs the shit out of it with like a knife. He's just like going to hell on it, man.
So after she smashes this little bastard, she dissects it. And here's another problem I had in this movie. In a dimly lit lab, this whole movie is so dark, which horror movie, okay, you're setting the vibe, the feel, but it doesn't make sense to me that these people who work in a lab don't have fluorescent lighting and shit. It's so dark.
And it's sometimes the movies will use the darkness to the point that it's like it's hard to, if you don't have like a really good, like you said before, the 4K thing, sometimes it like loses that resolution. Like, I hate to bring up Godzilla again, but the 2014 Godzilla movie, there's a difference between watching it on DVD and on Blu-ray. DVD, the dark scenes, I cannot see anything that is happening. It's almost like the screen's completely black. There were several scenes in this movie where that happened with me.
I got the same feeling from that movie, that Godzilla movie as well. So she gets an analysis report back that tells her that it is a beetle, and she takes her findings to Greg Lee because she needs help identifying another species in her sample. And he says it's gecko DNA. And he jokes her sample could have been contaminated. Obviously it's you. And she's like, well, it's not because I did it myself. My question to you is, this fungus that's on this leaf, the beetle ate it. So I'm guessing geckos were in that pot of stew with this fungus, because how does this fungus have gecko DNA in it? I'm no scientist, but that doesn't make sense to me.
The gecko, I'm assuming,
because she says, remember, it's loaded with animal hormones. I don't understand how that's possible. Do you?
I know nothing about science, but the only thing I can come up with is, could it possibly be like a vampiric sort of virus? And that anything it attaches itself to, it
like absorbs
the DNA.
That actually is possible, because if I remember correctly, at one point in the movie, one time she does say a viral fungus.
So that could be it. And so like maybe also the fungus isn't the original fungus. Like, okay, maybe after each creature that ingests the fungus, the DNA comes absorbed into it. And when it dies, it leaves more of the fungus. Like the fungus almost grows off of the corpse.
I see what you're saying. I just like how like our non-sciencey brains are trying to figure this shit out.
My ass is going into like storyteller mode. So I'm like trying to like almost like create this fungus in my mind.
So we get a quick cut to the restoration room, and it's really neat because there's blue lighting in this room, which I'm assuming helps with her being able to see different things when she's restoring this statue. We see the Cathoga is finally restored now at this point in the movie. And throughout the movie, I haven't mentioned it, but there have been quick 3-second cuts to the restoration process as it's been going on, but it's not significant enough to have mentioned up until this point.
No, but it's cool enough that it's like, it made me actually want that job at one point in my life. I was like, that would have been awesome.
So the gala gets underway now. We see a lot of people arriving outside. Underground, D'Augusta, Hollingsworth, and some other cops and the dogs are beginning their sweep of the tunnels and stuff. And we're going to get a lot of cutting, which again keeps the pace of this movie fast between the searching going on and the gala activity upstairs. Back and forth, back and forth. Love it. It totally works here. It keeps the movie from getting boring, I guess, is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
You're never bored. So down in the lab, Dr. Frock has gone looking for Margot because she's the only one left down there. And I should mention, moments before he shows up, Greg Lee, Dr. Lee, comes by and says to Margot, "You're the last one down here and the party's starting. You better get up there." And she's like, yeah. So Dr. Lee knows that only Margot is left down there. But then Dr. Frock goes looking for her and he says, "Hey, the party's starting. You better get up there because Greg Lee is schmoozing with the Blaisdells." You don't want to lose that grant money.
He's got some lips firmly on some ass.
Like a crustacean. So Margot steps around the corner as Dr. Frock is looking at her findings on the computer, and she slips into a dress and pins her hair up. Oof. He says the beetle sample contains reptilian DNA, which we knew because gecko. They discuss how the fungus is probably some kind of virus. Here's where that came in. And it mutates the DNA of its host. Well, that makes sense because the beetle got very big. It mutated the beetle.
It hulked out.
It really did. And then there was green goo everywhere. My question here is seeing this gala. They've got a string quartet situation playing music, the tables, the catering, the people, the staff, all the decor, the candles, the whole shebang. Who's paying for this? The museum is footing the bill for this. And I guess it's the theory of you've got to pay money to make money kind of thing.
That's kind of what I assumed. I mean, I could see maybe like some of the rich guests, or like maybe they were getting some kind of contributions or something. But yeah, I kind of guessed it was the museum's paying for this so they can get more money.
More money.
All I know is I actually wanted to attend that damn thing because the little salmon things and everything looks so freaking good. Oh.
So the mayor and his wife show up now, and we get the very big disappointment of no cleavage. I mean, is this bitch a B cup at most? There's no cleavage.
And I mean, I'm here to say, as a man, all boobs are beautiful regardless of size. I don't care, but
me too. But we were built up for the cleavage.
Yeah, don't hype up the cleavage and then disappoint us. I mean, that was just, you were expecting like at least some Pam Anderson size tits, and you got nothing.
Some election winning titties. That's what I wanted.
Exactly.
So then we cut to the dogs going crazy in this tunnel search. They're on the hot trail of something. Then we cut to Dr. Frock using Margot's computer to break down the hormone analysis even further. The fungus, apparently loaded with these different hormones, which we already knew. Margot finally puts 2 and 2 together about the packing leaves. Light bulb moment. The fungus on the leaves. That's what he was. The crates weren't empty. That was the shipment. We're like, no duh, bitch. Took you long enough.
Now, I don't recall whether or not I pieced this all together my first viewing, because that was so long ago. I mean, I can barely remember last week. So I don't remember if I figured that out my first time watching it or not. But yeah, it's like every other time you watch it, you're just like waiting for that light bulb to hit. And you're like, come on. You're a doctor. Figure this out. Come on, girl.
He points out to Margot that the human hypothalamus produces the same batch of hormones. They say that they remember now D'Augusta saying Fred was missing his hypothalamus, which is not quite what he had said, but they put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, that they figured out, but it took fucking forever to get to the damn leaves.
So back now up at the party, we see the Blaisdells arriving, and then we immediately cut to D'Augusta and the dogs in the tunnel. And then we cut back to the party. Head of security is speaking on his radioing the back office, watching everyone, these 2 guys, on security cameras in an office. There's like 3 old style little tube TVs. One has outside the building, one has the main exhibition hall, and I don't know what's on the other one. But I was like, wait a minute, buddy. You've got cameras. Do they just not record, maybe?
That's funny that's what you went to. Your logical brain went to picking apart the thing that was wrong with the movie, and my eye immediately drifted to the television screen that was showing an episode of the Andy Griffith Show. So I saw Andy Griffith like stretched out on the couch, and I was like, oh, I know that episode.
No, I was obsessed with the fact that the cameras were there, and okay, and yeah, well, they're bored. What are they going to do? They got to watch some TV.
Exactly, and I love their choice because I too am an Andy Griffith Show fan.
So the head of security is talking to them, and then we see Dr. Lee, Greg, comes over, and he confirms to the guy, nope, nobody on the lab level. I just came from there. All clear. And we're like, are you serious? You douchey little asshole. You know damn well Dr. Margot is still down there.
He's one of those actors that if I ever get the chance to meet him, I would tell him like, oh man, I just loved to hate you so much in this movie.
And they're like, thank you, job well done then. So the security guy, this also puzzled me. You've got this gala with all these supposedly background checked and personally invited high profile guest list, but you're going to lock down the entire museum because why? Are you worried somebody might go wandering down into the labs? Like, I was confused.
Yeah, somehow I don't picture any of these rich snobs wandering the museum to like steal exhibits or anything like that. But then I don't know, this is a world I'm not a part of. So maybe there are like, art thieves kind of style people that are like, they want like
like Thomas Crown Affair shit.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's like, hey, I really want a rhinoceros horn. So I'm going to go to the Natural History Museum and take a rhinoceros horn.
Or steal the Declaration of Independence. Whatever.
Exactly.
So the security guy takes Greg's word for it, and he tells the guys in the, security office to go ahead and lock everything down. I was so confused by this because on their monitor, you see in the old, very dated looking graphic way with the red boxes showing all the areas that are getting sectioned off, and they lock everything down. And it was so, so weird to me. But they do it. They lock everything down except the main hall.
To me, it's like the way they were locking it down, it almost looked like they were trying to launch like a nuclear missile or something. It's like everything was flipping switches, and it was like, damn.
I thought that too. It was very like 80s movie, like War Games ish.
Yeah, I almost want to like at one scene to be added to where they both have to like put in a key and turn the key at the exact same time.
So Margot says to Dr. Frock, who went down looking for her, okay, we're locked in apparently. So we're going to go down the stairs and across the sub basement. And I like that he just quickly goes, stairs, because he's in that wheelchair. And she's like, I hope your brakes work.
I love that line. Like you said before, like their interaction, the characters, all these characters' interactions together, they feel natural. Like these are like how these people would actually be talking in real life.
But in my mind, when she was like, oh, we have to go downstairs, I hope your brakes work, I'm like, no, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. You're not going to take this man down the stairs. You weigh what, 87 pounds? That's not happening.
I don't know. Maybe she's one of those people that she's a lot stronger than she looks. Hopefully she is. Then she can carry me over the threshold.
Back at the gala, we see Greg Lee schmoozing it up with the Blaisdells. And it's so funny because he's doing that painfully forced laughter and like interjecting himself in their conversation.
Oh yeah, that is. And I've been in that same spot where you're trying to smooth somebody a little bit. And you're kind of like, and it just that awkward moment of, everyone's looking at you like, all right, pull your nose out of their ass.
So down in the tunnels, the dogs have led this team deep in, and they supposedly go all the way to Lake Michigan, one of the guys says. And D'Agusta figures out that the tunnels connect the shipyard to the museum. You're just now getting that light bulb moment. Didn't the guy at the top of the movie tell you those tunnels go through?
True, but I don't think he put the connection together with the museum, because it kind of feels like the museum's a little farther away. And how often are you in the sewers wandering the tunnels?
Unless you're a turtle.
Or, you just like sewers and shit.
So Pennywise the clown. So the dogs get loose and take off running and barking crazy into this tunnel. They go pretty far, and all these guys have are these little flashlights, so it's dark down there. We hear squealing and yelping, and my heart sinks every time I watch this, even though I know it's coming. We don't see it. I hate it. I hate when a dog dies in a movie. Kill every one of them fuckers, but not the dog.
Since I'm not a dog person, it doesn't bother me. I was just like, meh. I'm like, all right.
What if it had been a cat, a drug cat?
then yes. If it was a cat, it would have broke my heart.
So I do like that when the dogs take off, the cop who's the handler for these dogs and clearly takes care of them because you can tell he's connected, he yells after them their names. And I had to look it up. I was laughing. He yells Castor and Pollux after the dogs. Castor and Pollux are the twin half-brothers from Greek and Roman mythology. And I just thought, mythology, like they're tying it in kind of to the movie. That's so fun to me.
I enjoy that too. I like that. And I like the fact that they do show the connection with the dogs. He cares about the dogs. So he's not like, he's just going to let them run off and be like, oh, they're dogs, they're expendable. It's like, no, he's going after them. So
then here's another little teeny tiny beef I have with the movie. The dogs, as we saw, the men have little flashlights, not big high powered things. The dogs take off down this long, dark tunnel. Well, now they're all standing there. And here comes this dog's shredded, dead, bloody body flying through the air and landing at their feet. How? This tunnel was so long when you see the dogs take off. And then here's this body, boop, comes landing right at their feet. And the monster's not right there. It's like, oh, come on. But that's you see the definition and the muscle of this monster. It's just got a hell of an arm. You think he just launched it? Yeah, it's like, this is obviously, somebody that the Cubs should be looking at for, scouting, because he's got a hell of an arm on him. Now batting, Dr. Whitney Chimera Monster, the Cathoga. So DeGusta gets upset by this, as they all do, and he immediately yells at Hollingsworth, get upstairs and get whoever's in charge and get everyone out of the museum now. The officer that leaning over the dog is the one that obviously handles them. He's very upset. He jumps up and runs off into the tunnel after the other dog, screaming and yelling. And again, we get a shot of just how long this tunnel is. He is the size of an ant by the time we see him get to the end of that tunnel. So then we see Margot and Dr. Frock wandering the halls, and we get a little joke thing where he just goes, "You're lost, aren't you?" And she's like, "Yep." Yes, I am.
I love it when they actually admit to being lost instead of that. It's like, yeah, I'm lost. Deal with it.
Then we cut to everyone now at the Superstition exhibition, the opening there that I said earlier. We just saw the front of it, and it's so cool. It's like this big giant mouth with like red eyes.
Apparently that was based on something too. I don't have.
Is it? It's so cool looking. The mayor standing there making a speech before they're getting ready to go in, and he makes some joke. I didn't write it down, but it was funny. Then we cut to the police officer now finding the other dog alive. Yay, hats and horns. Woohoo, the dog's alive. I was so excited. Only to get immediately killed off camera, the man, as we see. And it's so effective because I don't feel cheated that we don't see the death, because it's off camera in shadow and the flashlight is just shining on the dog, and he's sitting there with his head down like he's intimidated and scared and just kind of cowering. And when we see a silhouette of the monster's mouth like in the flashlight beam, and then it goes past the dog and leaves, it's so effective and freaky.
It's a great camera shot. Because if I remember right, the death, like I said, you don't see it, but like you see the blood coming down, like he's dead. Like that effect really kind of makes it work. And sometimes, like you see in horror movies, that's what's cool is that if you don't see the gore, you don't see the death, but you know what's happening, your imagination can make it 10 times worse. I do love that effect.
So then DeGusta is now alone. He goes after that man. He finds the lair of the monster with lots of bones and dead bodies. And then he continues down a tunnel and he finds the dog who's alive.
And again, I'm not a dog person, but I will admit when he finds the dog, that dog was pretty damn cute.
Oh, he's licking his face and he's like
adorable. And when you saw the lair of the monster, did you get the same vibe that I got from like Alligator? Like when they go into the sewers and they get to the lair of the alligator?
Yes, I was waiting for Ramon to show up this whole time.
Exactly. It just like the whole lair just kind of gave me that vibe. I was like, oh, this would have been an awesome crossover movie.
That's the sequel we need.
Yes.
So Hollingsworth is now running, and we get lots of cuts back and forth to them running to the main hall. He finally finds Dr. Cuthbert. She's leading a tour with the mayor and some other people through this exhibit, and they get to the devil god Cathoga. It's been restored in time for the exhibit. Hollingsworth interrupts and tells the mayor, we have to get everyone out of the museum right now. And of course, we get the trope of a woman dressed in white, blood dripping on her outfit. Drip, drip, drip from above. She's got to be wearing white, otherwise it doesn't work.
It's stereotypical in movies. Like I said, it's a trope, but it like sometimes it could just make a really cool effect. It is kind of like a nice build-up.
And then so she notices the blood's dripping and it hits her face, and then a body with no head drops from the ceiling above and gets impaled when it shatters a display case and lands on a bunch of spears. Everybody screams, just complete chaos. They panic and they're all trying to get out at the same time, and there's people getting trampled. It's just crazy. I hate in a movie, I hate to see people get stomped and trampled. It really bothers me.
It kind of does me too, because I guess because it's so like realistic. Like, okay, the decapitation, it's like how often does that stuff happen in day-to-day life? But it's like the trampling and stuff, you immediately go back to like Black Friday sales, and you're like, oh damn.
Right?
But I do like that it is a standard in all, especially monster movies. There's always the mass panic scene. where everybody is running and like running over each other. And it's such a staple in monster movies that I've kind of come to enjoy it a little bit.
I've come to enjoy the stomping of faces. It's cool. So the museum security system is now triggered when that case is broken into thinking it's a robbery alert. So cages start to drop around the valuable displays, doors start closing. The system is going into like an overdrive situation. Large doors, like really big fire doors, are closing. The security office cameras are going crazy, and the security guys are like, oh my God, is there an earthquake happening? We don't have earthquakes here. What's going on? And like, just the system is overloaded, and it's a little bit silly. Come on, really?
Especially because like there should be, like, you would think logically there's a fail safe to kind of protect that stuff. Like no matter what, how bad it gets, there's going to be something to shut it down.
And then on top of that, we get this unnecessary shot of sparkings and an explosion happening on these big, I don't know, they look like generators or something, but they're the big like electrical system that runs for the building or something.
Like almost like Transformers kind of
Transformers, thank you. But there's, and they start exploding. And I'm like, your system doesn't, like you just said, doesn't have a fail safe that when robbery alarm is triggered, that the whole system explodes. Like what?
Apparently they didn't prepare for that. It was, more than meets the eye.
And then after all this happens, the power goes completely out. Some red emergency and floodlights come on. And then the sprinkler system starts to go off, soaking everybody and everything. Mass hysteria continuing, people stampeding over each other to get out to the main hall. Then they go through a revolving glass door, much like the spinning door from Darkman. But there's so many people trying to get through it that the glass just all shatters and people's bodies just fall through. I'm cringing. This is like worst nightmare for me. I hate this stuff. People are bloodied and injured, and the mob pushes out and gets outside a lot of these people.
It's like I said, it's a staple in these movies. I do enjoy them. My corny ass tends to, sometimes when I see this stuff, I immediately go to like start playing the soundtrack in my mind of da 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 da.
Yes. Especially when they all start falling down this giant flight of cement stairs outside and they're all rolling down the stairs. You just expect like circus music.
Yeah, that or what would be epic is the Benny Hill theme.
Yes. So finally, the heavy emergency fire doors start to close and they end up trapping Cuthbert, Hollingsworth, the mayor, the Blaisdells, and a few other people still inside.
I love how Hollingsworth's bright idea is, here's these big metal doors, which are probably like thousands of pounds, have like all this pressure. And hey, I got a great idea. Let's go grab this tiny wooden chair to prop it open. Really?
Yeah, one of the little chairs from the,
Like that's not going to do a thing.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. And then he looks so sad when it doesn't work.
Oh.
So the two morons in the security office try to figure out about the power. Well, one of them says he can go into the generator room or whatever room he says. And he goes and finds that there's a box on the wall and all the wires are like ripped up and it's all burnt up. And he goes, oh, what the hell did that? Why would your brain immediately go to a what? Maybe it was a person.
Maybe he's a horror fan. In his mind, it's automatically a horror creature of some kind.
So the man goes back into the other office and he finds the other guy dead. And this reveal that he's dead is so fucking cool because the room is, I think it's red lit at this point or really dark. And he taps the guy on the shoulder and his head just falls back, but it's still attached like on the shoulders a little bit. So it's almost like Ash in Alien, when his head just kind of comes back and his neck it's just flopping hanging there. It was kind of like that. It was so gross.
I didn't even think of that, but it does remind me of that. And that is a great reveal. It kind of had a little bit of, to me, like Jurassic Park vibes of like, when Samuel L. Jackson's character goes to check on the power and then Ellie goes to find him and you see the arm and she just the arm. It's like, that kind of reminded me a little bit of that.
Yeah, as soon as that head falls back, it's like, oh, he did. So you need to go. He turns around and he looks up in this really cool slow shot, like as if the monster is slowly getting bigger and bigger and revealing himself in front of him. My question was, how the hell does this thing fit in this little tiny security office?
I was thinking the same thing. There's so many inconsistencies with this monster. How is it in so many places at once getting across this huge building?
Well, it does run pretty fast. It gallops like a horse or something, or a lion even.
It does, but still, it's like sometimes it feels like within seconds it's in one place or another, and then like I said, it's fitting in these tight spaces. It's like this thing is like mutating as it's going.
So now DeGusta finds the dead cop, the dog owning cop, and he's got that dog with him, and he uses his radio down in this deep sewer tunnel to talk to the head of security. How are these fucking things now magically working? What the actual hell?
Yeah, I got nothing.
So DeGusta talks with the mayor and says Hollingsworth is in charge and you need to do whatever he says. And then he tells Hollingsworth over this radio, take everyone down the fire stairs into the tunnels and you will come out across the street. The Blaisdells say that they can't do that. We're too sickly or old or whatever their excuse is. We can't do the stairs and the tunnel. We're going to stay put. The head of security starts to whine about how it's so dirty down there and I can't go in the tunnels. And I was like, are you serious, bro? I hate this guy so much.
He's such a whiny little bitch. You're just like, shut up.
So he says, fine, I'll stay behind with the Blaisdells. And Greg Lee sees an opportunity for more ass kissing. And he says he'll stay behind too to protect the Blaisdells.
This man is like a Hall of Fame legend of ass kissing. The fact that people are dying, there's something seriously wrong going on in this. And his immediate thought is like, oh, I'm going to stay behind and kiss some more ass. That's just epic.
So we get Blaisdells, Greg Lee, head of security, and then Hollingsworth makes this one other cop stay behind.
I think that was McNally.
So a nice button on this is right before they're leaving, the group that is going to follow Hollingsworth, Cuthbert turns and fires that whiny head of security before she walks off. And I was like, yes, queen.
She was such a boss. She was like, oh, I love her.
So DeGusta and the dog run into Margot and Dr. Frock when they're opening a large steel door. They get bum rushed by the monster, who's now back down there, running down this damn tunnel at top speed. They slam the door just in time. The monster starts banging into it. It's bending the steel, making like an indentation of its face and body as it's slamming into the door. And then we see what looks like blood coming under the door, like it's hurt itself, and the monster retreats. It goes away.
Now, when I saw it, I mean, I could never figure out if it was saliva or if it was blood, but like the lighting on it almost made it look like the liquid metal from Terminator 2.
That's why I assumed it was blood at this moment.
Okay, yeah, because I was just like, oh shit, is this thing like shape-shifting now? Is it going to come out and be like, oh damn, Terminator 2 style?
Well, Stan Winston did do the exoskeleton for Terminator, so you know. Maybe he had that on his mind.
I didn't think about that.
So Dr. Frock says he thinks that is the Cathoga. He says he thinks Dr. Whitney somehow found it in Brazil and had it sent to the museum. But why didn't he warn us first? I was like, are you serious? You think that he sent that giant ass animal? No.
That is like the weirdest explanation in the entire movie. Like you just picture like Whitney just being like, you know, in the jungle, petting it, being like, hey, we're going to go on a little trip together. And then it gets pissed off because Whitney's not there.
So DeGusta states the obvious. It is too big to have fit in one of those crates. Thank you. Somebody said it at least. Margot points out that the leaves had that hormone fungus. So maybe this animal started out as a lizard or something, gecko DNA there, and it ate the leaves and it changed into whatever it is now. Dr. Frock tells a tribal story of the myth relating to the creation of the Cathoga. I didn't write down the full story, but it's something along the lines of the tribesmen would get angry at whoever, have enemies. And they would create this monster. They would feed it this hormone, and then they would withhold the hormone and go into hiding so that the animal had no choice but to go kill the other tribe in search of this hormone. And then once his supply was depleted, he would die off, and then the original tribe would come back out of hiding. Something along those lines was the story.
Which sounds like some real like Hunger Games style bullshit. If it's like, you know, like, I volunteer myself to become the monster.
Right? So Margot takes a sample of this Cathoga goo on the floor with some bubble wrap. And as she's swiping it up, we can now see that it's like a clear liquid of some kind. And I was like, okay, that's probably not blood.
And we're just hoping it's saliva.
And this line killed me too. Some of these things in this movie, like I said, silly. He says, how the fuck do we kill that thing? You've spent the entire movie up to this point discussing how it is a mutated animal with animal hormones and animal DNA. I would imagine you could squash it, blow it up, shoot it, any number of ways that you would kill any other animal. You hit it with a bus, whatever. Why is this so hard to figure out?
I would have absolutely loved to see them hit it with a bus. Now that you bring it up, like just out of nowhere. And like not even in the middle of the street, like in the middle of the museum, out of nowhere, this bus comes out.
Well, that's why I thought to myself too, now that I say that, those tunnels come out on the street. I'm guessing because of budgetary reasons and restrictions, they couldn't film this movie all over. They needed to keep it in a suspenseful, tight central location like the museum. Why would this thing not have just gone out the tunnels and taken off? I mean, we're talking good eating when you're out in the world, right? There's people everywhere.
Oh yeah, it's like a smorgasbord of like, you know, hypothalamus is all anywhere you go, you're going to get hypothalamus. So
the world is lousy with hypothalamuses.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a hypothalamus these days. So
yes, but that was weird to me. Like, why did we stay in this central location? I'm guessing just for tension purposes.
I'm assuming because, you know, you wanted the tension and the claustrophobia feel.
So Margot says, well, we can't kill it until we figure out what it is first. And again, I went, huh? It's a fucking animal.
Okay, that part makes sense only because in not just in movies, but in science in general. I mean, how many times have you heard like the whole Bigfoot thing was like, oh, well, we can't kill Bigfoot because we got to study it. And like you're thinking, yeah, it's like if a Bigfoot comes charging at me, I'm not going to ask it for its life story. I'm blasting that son of a bitch in the face with a shotgun.
I'm not going to ask it for a stool sample.
Excuse me, Mr. Foot, can you please crap in this bag for me?
Mr. Foot!
Well, if I'm going to ask for a stool sample, I'm going to be polite. I'm just not going to walk up and say, hey, you can get in the bag.
Bend over and cough. So Dr. Frock says he'll stay there. I'm not going to make it up the stairs. You and D'Augusta go to your lab. I'll sit tight. And I was like, oh no. But he stays there.
I did not want to see him sacrifice himself. It's like, you know, come on, man. Especially it's like when D'Augusta's like, I'll carry you. It's like, yes, carry him. Just
yes.
Pick his old ass up and walk with him, please.
Outside now, hundreds of police show up along with SWAT and people that look like military and firemen. Like, it's a big to-do. Everybody's here. They go in and they begin to try to cut that fire door open. Then we cut back to Margot and D'Augusta in her lab now, and she's explaining what she's doing as she's doing it to D'Augusta, which I appreciate because it tells us what she's doing as well. So the sample processes on the computer, and we see D'Augusta standing there rubbing his good luck bullet, which is the shiny little thing in his hand. And I was like, I'm sure that's what he had before. And then he tells her the story of the bullet. This cracked me up. Please help me with this. He says when he was first on the job as a beat cop, he came upon a guy breaking into a car or whatever. And the guy pointed the gun at him and shot at him point blank, and the gun did not go off. And then forensics analyzed the gun and the bullet and said that there's no good reason why it didn't fire. The bullet was fine. The gun was fine. It should have gone off, but it just didn't. So he says, this is my lucky bullet because I should be dead.
So does your bullet have a story?
I was on the beat my rookie year, and I saw this guy who locked his keys in his car with his motor running. He's got a clothes hanger, and he's trying to get the lock off. So I go over and try to help him out. And what I didn't know was that he just robbed the liquor store a block away. So he's concentrating so hard. You know, he doesn't see me till I'm right up on top of him. I surprise him, turns, and Point blank range. Doesn't pop, though. This bullet.
So what did you do?
Took the gun away from him and beat the shit out of him. Anyway, the forensics told me later that, bullet's perfect. Should have fired. I should be dead.
So in other words, a miracle of physics.
Maybe just plain old-fashioned good luck.
My question in that story is no, because why would forensics do all that and then hand you evidence in a case? Here, you can keep the bullet. What? I'm pretty sure that's not how that works. I mean, I'm no police officer or forensic expert, but
with the bullet thing, the only thing I can kind of figure out is like, well, maybe because it didn't actually get fired, it's not actually evidence.
All right.
The gun's more evidence than the bullet is, especially because like you got so many bullets in there anyways. You'd be like, here, have one.
So this cracked me up. My husband didn't watch this with me right now because he's actually never seen this movie, but I was explaining to him this bit, trying to ask him the same question I just asked you. And I told him her response to the bullet story is, well, it could just be a miracle of physics. And he says, or plain old fashioned good luck, because she doesn't believe in luck. My husband says to me, and that never occurred to me, and he says to me, miracle of physics doesn't make sense because miracle is faith and belief, and she's a scientist. So why would she say that choice of words? That doesn't make sense. I was like, oh,
that totally just blew my mind. I didn't think about that either.
She wouldn't think it's a miracle because she doesn't believe in luck and all that.
Yeah. And she's smart enough that it's like she's not the kind of person that would kind of mix words just randomly.
All right. So back in the main hall, the head of security is pacing around and complaining, suddenly gets swiped up by the giant mandibles of this monster and gets his head torn off. It is glorious because we hate this guy.
It was the most satisfying death in this entire movie. You were waiting for it to happen, and when it finally happens, you're like, oh, thank you, monster. Thank you.
Greg and the Blaisdells are sitting there in shock watching this happen. The one cop that was left starts opening fire on the monster, but he gets swiped by the long tail and goes flying into an exhibit case. Then we get a panning shot now of the monster because he's kind of raised up on this platform in the middle. We get to see the tail, the feet. We finally get up to the head, but it's really dark. And so we can't really make it out well, but it's just enough that it's fun tease again of what this thing is. And then we get a long shot and we get a much better look because it turns real quick and it jumps off the platform and runs after Greg Lee, who has left the room. He bolted. Bitch was out.
Apparently his ass-kissing ability has just kind of failed him at this point. He's just got to run.
Every man for himself at this point, right? And so we do get to see some of the monster here as he's chasing after him. I do like when Greg Lee dies in the exhibit, the monster gets in there and gets him. We get a quick shot of his reflection of his little part of his face up close. And he reminds me of the Predator, the way his mouth opens and the coloring of his face.
Yeah, I thought that same thing. I did love that, like the design. It's been years since I've read the book, so I don't remember if they described it or whatever, but it's like Winston just did an amazing job creating this creature.
Yes, and I'll put pictures on social of it because it's really fucking cool.
Oh yeah, and I love like the mandibles of it.
Yeah.
It has this like epic look to it.
So back in the lab, Margot reads over the results of her analysis of the goo to find that it is very similar to the beetle's DNA from before.
When you see the picture of the beetle and you see the mandibles, and then there's that connection of like, okay, now you explain why it has mandibles.
Exactly. Outside now on the roof, we see that the main exhibition space there where they were having the gala, there's big glass skylights, like a ceiling of glass, and helicopters are shining their lights in, and they start dropping SWAT or military type guys. They look like they're wearing fatigues, some of them, onto this roof.
I couldn't tell if it was military or SWAT either, because it looked like SWAT, but they were dressed like military. So I was a little confused.
So the lights are shining into the skylight, and we see the monster is now back in this space after came back from killing Greg real fast. He must be able to teleport or something.
This is what I'm wondering. It's like this thing either it's teleporting or it's just like, well, we're not seeing it. It's going around the museum on like one of those little scooters or something.
So he's back in this space watching as a single man on a rope. Pretty sure they don't do it this way. I've usually in movies and TV, they all drop in at once, a bunch of people. One guy comes in on a rope. He immediately gets taken out by the monster. And I love that the monster just swoops from one side of the frame through the shot, grabs him, and goes out the other side. And then he bites another man's head off who's coming down. And then a third guy comes down. And my question is, can nobody see in with the lights from these helicopters that there's a fucking monster right here?
That was a little, yeah, you think like by the second guy, he should have seen what was going on and would have been like, hey, at least called up. There's something down here. Don't send anybody else down. I would assume, I'm like you're no cop. I'm no soldier. But I assume like, if you're a soldier, your orders are you essentially group or crew or whatever they're called, unit comes before you. So you're going to radio to your unit. Don't come down here. It's dangerous. And you're willing to sacrifice your life.
So the third guy on the rope has seen what's happened and he starts yelling to pull him up. Pull me up. But he doesn't say, yeah, there's something going on. He just pull me up.
Exactly.
So they pull him up, and just as he's leaning the top part of his body over the opening to get pulled back up onto the roof, he's bitten in half by the monster who has crawled up the wall. We saw this like Spider-Man.
I thought the same thing.
And up and over and around the little curve of the ceiling. My question was, why didn't he keep going out the opening and onto the roof, the monster? Again, staying in this contained space, I guess. But he bites the man in half, and it just like out of Lake Placid, they pull the top half of the man's body and the bottom half is completely missing. It's so gory. I love it.
I love it. The only thing missing from it I really wanted, and it wouldn't have fit in this movie, but I just would have died if it would have been right when he got bit in half. He would have had the guy say, damn, only 3 more days till retirement.
No, we get something even better than that. Because what happens is the soldier, we're going with soldier, that pulls him up, looks like he's got gray hair. He looks like he's 50. He's clearly been a soldier, sees this guy's dead body, leans back and gives us a fantastic no. And he's crying and screaming in horror over this man. Have you never been in battle, sir? It is the most unprofessional reaction in the middle of a combat. You don't do that.
It's the only bit of bad acting in the entire movie to me. And I loved it so much. Like you said, the fact that he says it is bad enough, but the delivery of the no, it's like, oh my God, dude.
It was horrible.
It was worse than the no at the end of the third Star Wars one, Revenge of the Sith, when Vader gives that no. It's even worse than that one. This is like the worst no I've ever heard.
And what got me to add insult to injury was the fact that this is a soldier, an older soldier who's clearly been in situations, and this is your reaction? I don't think so. So Dr. Frock is still sitting there downstairs waiting. The monster, again, teleported, and he's all the way down there now, finds him, creeps up on him. And I love, because we know Dr. Frock, we know his life's work, we know how he thinks and views these things. Instead of being horrified and screaming and freaking out when he sees this monster approaching, he starts to smile, and you can see the joy in his eyes and on his face, the realization that his life's work is real. Like, this is really something, and it's here right in front of him. Yes, it's going to kill you, but he doesn't care in that moment because he's so tickled that it's real and it's there.
It's amazing. It's the same look I want on my face when my heart bursts as I'm watching Scooby-Doo eating a bag of pork rinds.
It's so sad because you know he's about to die, but you're also kind of like happy for him that he's got this moment before he dies, and he's going to die by the thing that is giving him this weird joy. It's such a crazy thing.
The only thing would have been better is if you could have had, like, after he dies, Margot there screaming, no.
So back in Margot's lab, her results now yield a 33% match to Homo sapien DNA. She says, oh my God, this thing started out as a human. Bum, bum, bum.
And that to me was a great twist because I did not, first time seeing it, I did not see that coming. So I was like, oh, damn. Okay, this is interesting.
Yep. Hollingsworth and D'Augusta communicate via radio. How it's working. Hollingsworth tells D'Augusta he's about to go into the deep tunnels, but he thinks the monster is following them. Really, bro? You heard somebody fucking kick a rock behind you. Calm down. Like, the monster did not make it back down there that fast.
Now, on top of the fact that this monster's got some major ninja skills because it's showing up randomly out of nowhere. I mean, you really just wanted it to be like, monster vanish.
You had to work that in, didn't you?
I'm going to work it into everything we do.
So as they go to grab the last few leaves with the fungus, Margot's like, you know what? We should lure the monster with these leaves. I think it's smart, but I'm also wondering why the monster's going to care at this point, because he's got humans for the picking, just everywhere. Why is he going to care about worrying about getting these leaves? But they need to bait the trap, I guess.
Well, sometimes you crave a salad.
So Margot tells D'Augusta the creature is part reptilian, so it's probably ectothermic, meaning it can't handle extremes of hot or cold. As she's saying this as she's grabbing some liquid nitrogen, and she says, maybe we can freeze him. I thought this was a lot of hypothesizing. I was like, really, bitch? This is the plan? Are you serious?
At this point, she got to such a badass level that I don't know. She could have told me she was going to throw Rice Krispie treats at it, and I would have been like, I'm going to follow you to the end of the earth, woman.
Well, if she can find your weakness.
And Rice Krispie treats are my weakness.
So D'Augusta and Dr. Margot find Dr. Frock's body. We don't see it, but we do see the overturned wheelchair, and she screams like she did when she stumbled onto Fred's body earlier in the movie.
And she's got a great scream. Like you really believe like the hurt in her voice, especially with Frock. Like you really heard the hurt.
Well, we've bought the relationship. We really buy into it. It's believable.
Yeah, but I mean, you kind of almost expected, like I said, the half-assed no. So it's like you go from a crappy acting to like, oh my God, she's actually really hurt by this.
So they head off into the tunnel, and then we cut to Hollingsworth leading everyone. Oh, this is where the movie got amazing for me. I have a thing about water and water monsters. Like one of these days, we're going to do some of my water monster movies. Deep Star 6, Leviathan, all these movies, Deep Rising.
Oh my God, I actually made a list and Leviathan was on it. So, okay, totally, yes.
Because my thing is, and like Jaws and shark movies, I don't like when you can't see what's in the water with you. Clear water, I'm fine. Swimming pool, I'm fine. When you can't see what's under the water, tension is through the roof.
Yeah, there's a whole reason. It's because of movies like that and this that I will not go into lakes, ponds, or oceans. If I swim, which is very rarely, it will be in a pool and a pool only.
Right. So we cut to Hollingsworth leading this group into a tunnel that is filled waist deep in water. And first I went, how's that possible? But then I remember the guy casually mentioning earlier that the tunnels go all the way to Lake Michigan, and there's been some sewer pipes down here. Like, it makes sense maybe that there'd be some tunnels flooded, I guess.
I could have swore I heard something about flooded tunnels at a point too. I don't recall exactly, but yeah.
So there's some more radio chat. D'Augusta says he's on his way. We're coming to you, but keep going. Look, no duh. Now, this is a scene that should be dumb. It should be silly. It should be boring. It should be stupid. It is so fucking tense. I'm chalking that up to the direction, the music, the shot, the camera angles, how they shoot with the water. Now, at this point, they've been going through the tunnel a little bit, and it's chest deep now. And poor Linda Hunt is up to her neck because she's so much shorter than everybody else. I would die.
Yeah, I felt so bad for her. You wanted like one of the cops or somebody to be like, hey, hop on my back or something.
Put her on their shoulders like she's at a concert.
Exactly. Like something like, 'cause it's not like she's gonna hit her head. She's so tiny anyway. So
Yeah, it's so fucking tense. My God. And then as they're going through this longer tunnel now, the guy at the back, the one cop,
Bailey.
gets pulled under the water and blood starts to squirt up on the water and everyone screams and begins rushing forward to get out of there. Hollingsworth sees the Cathoga rise up out of the water. He has a woman in his mouth, kills her, and then decides to leave. Like Hollingsworth watches it turn and sees its tail as it's swimming away. And I was like, that's weird. Why did it just kill two people and then leave?
Yeah, you'd think like they never said, does it have to be a fresh hypothalamus? Can he like pull a bunch of them and lock them up in like a refrigerator somewhere?
Well, it's not like he's going to the McDonald's drive-through getting two hypothalamus and a shake to go. So Hollingsworth leads these people that are left out of the water and up some of the back stairs into a dry tunnel, and they keep going. Then we cut to D'Augusta and Dr. Margot hanging the bag of leaves. They're using them for bait. He hands her his lucky bullet, and she just gives him a look like, okay, but also thank you. Like it's a really great expression she gives on her face where she's kind of like, I guess, thanks. And she tucks it in her dress, in her cleavage.
Lucky bullet.
So they hang up these leaves on a grate here in the tunnel, and Margot fires up the liquid nitro. Just as D'Augusta turns, the monster pops up out of the water. How he got into this tiny space without them seeing him, I, to this day, numerous rewatches, am very confused. Because that grate blocks the tunnel off where he's walking up to tie the leaves, and she's on some steps not 10 feet behind him. Where the fuck did this thing come from?
This is one of the major things that annoys me with this movie. And probably one of the only things is that the monster seems to change size constantly. And like, how is it getting to these places so quickly? It's like, there is just so much inconsistency there, but you just enjoy too much to care.
No, I would agree with you. Yeah. We're picking it apart because we're talking about it now and dissecting it. But just when you're sitting and watching this movie, that stuff just washes over you. You're like, I don't fucking care.
Oh yeah, you're like in the moment. It's like when you're sitting down with like, a dozen donuts and you just, after you've eaten all dozen, then you're like, oh, what the hell did I just do? But in the moment, you just don't give a shit.
So when this monster pops up, D'Augusta is mere feet in front of Margot, off to the side a little. She blasts this thing with the liquid nitrogen, and how he doesn't get hit by spray from this, I didn't understand. But she blasts this thing and then drops it, and they take off running out of the tunnel. Then the monster pops up and we see that he's fine. It didn't phase him. Good plan. How do we kill this thing? I don't know. Blast it with liquid nitro. I don't know. How about just fucking get a machine gun and open fire on it? How about that? If it bleeds, you can kill it.
I want to see you in a horror movie now, just like shooting like this logic at these people.
Right? I am that commercial where the people are running away from the killer and they run up to the barn full of chainsaws and there's a running car off to the side and everyone's like, let's go hide behind the chainsaws. And the one person is like, why don't we just get into the running car? And they're all, no, I'm that person. I'm the let's get into the running car. What the fuck is wrong with you people?
I absolutely love that commercial because in my mind, when they go behind the chainsaws, the guy's like the killer's looking at him and just rolls his eyes. In my mind, like this is where he lost interest in killing people and he just went to go become like a tax accountant.
He's like, they're so stupid, I don't even want to kill them. So Hollingsworth gets the mayor, Dr. Cuthbert, and the rest of everyone there out of the tunnels over to the police out in front of the museum. And then we cut to D'Augusta locking Margot in her lab just in time, magically, for her to get the rest of the lab results. Turns out the Homo sapien DNA is, drumroll please, Dr. John Whitney. Dun,
Okay.
dun, dun.
Now, am I the only one, and this is to you and anyone who's watched this movie, am I the only person that felt the reveal of Dr. Whitney was a little bit of a letdown? You kind of didn't care. It's like you didn't care enough about Whitney to begin with, and then you're at basically the end of the movie and you find out who it is and you're like, okay, big deal.
Yeah, the only thing that was the thing that was better the thing that was shocking was when she gets the first result of the 33% human and she goes, oh my God, this thing started as a human. You're like, what?
Yeah, it's like,
and now we find out who the human is. And it's like, okay, I kind of figured after that other reveal.
Yeah, like that's where you should have had the reveal of what was when it was human, because at this point you didn't really care anymore. You already knew it was human.
All right, so again, here we go with some geography. This doesn't make sense to me. Margot gets all excited at these results and she's going to run off and find Lieutenant D'Augusta. She's running and yelling. She's still in this underground lab wing. She doesn't get but 10 feet. And then all of a sudden we cut to her yelling, Lieutenant. She's in this room with the glass ceiling and helicopter lights shining through. And it's like, what? Can she teleport now too? How the fuck did she get there in 2 seconds? Then the Cathoga comes crashing down from above. What?
Yeah, because especially the entire time, it's never once left the building. Because I'm assuming that skylight obviously is going to the roof or something. Like
that's what you would think.
Yeah, so now it's on the roof and no helicopters, no one shooting at it.
Then she turns to run away from it and it's chasing her down a hall. And all of a sudden we're running past the cage area. What? That's not geographically correct for how this layout was. Then she starts breaking everything in. She's running through the halls of this lab area. And you're like, where the fuck? I need a map to follow how this bitch is getting around. She's breaking everything in the cage, all the jars filled with liquids. She's busting a bunch of shit. And then the Cathoga starts running through the lab halls, busting down a bunch of doors. And then suddenly is at the cage place where Margot is. So confused about the layout of this place. She makes it rain flammable liquid, puts together a combustible combination of powders in a jar, which from seeing enough movies, we're like, oh, okay, she's going to make an explosion. So she's getting this ready real quick.
Which is interesting. I want to throw in before we get too far into that.
Sure.
Apparently, that whole thing that she's doing with the combustible jar and thing, that was also something that Jean-Claude Van Damme used in the movie Sudden Death, which was also directed by the same director. So he rehashed the same thing.
Oh my God, what year was that?
I don't know what year Sudden Death. I think it came out after 1995.
So right before this.
Yes, I believe it actually came out like a little bit before this.
That's hilarious. Well, we know it works, right? Or at least tropey it works in movies.
It's been years since I've seen Sudden Death. It'd be great if it was the same exact concoction.
So she's hiding behind this stack of shelves and the Cathoga comes in. Again, size is debatable. He goes in this little cage and up the stairs to the second level. Perfectly fine, fits in here to do this, but he's supposed to be gigantic.
Incredible shrinking Cathoga.
There's a sequel. So the Cathoga startles her, walks up to her down this hall slowly, like predator style, like creeping on her like a predator on prey. And it's kind of freaky. Backs her up to this little freight elevator. I thought her plan was, it's there within 5 feet of you. You chuck the jar at this thing and hop into that elevator and kick rocks like you're gone. That's not what happens here. I was shocked. She lets it get right up to her, right in front of her face. And she says, I know who you are. Like that's like she can reason with it or something. What?
Maybe she was going to do that like Scooby-Doo moment of like rip off its face and then like, oh no, it's John Whitney.
And then we get an unnecessary thing, which I will say in this movie, we didn't need it. We get this CGI lizard tongue that comes out and licks her face and chest and shit. And I'm like, we don't need that movie. Like this thing has not one time shown that it plays with its food. It just immediately rips your head off. There is none of this.
Well, maybe he was trying to get a taste of her because I mean, a lot of the victims have been kind of heavier set. She's a little skinny. So maybe he wants to like make sure she's got enough fat on her. She's juicy.
Her hypothalamus will be juicy.
Yeah. You don't want to get a bad hypothalamus.
You really don't. So she tosses the flammable jar over the monster and the room catches fire. And then it kicks up and the Cathoga catches fire. She jumps into this little freight elevator and goes down, comes out on the next floor and starts running down the hall. Now, this is the bad CGI I was talking about. The tongue was one thing. The room looks great. She's running out of this room. It's on fire. It looks great. But the Cathoga comes down the stairs and starts chasing her. And the Cathoga itself on fire looks like shit.
It's very dated. This is one of the few parts that it just did not hold up.
No, it did. It wasn't so bad that it took me out of the movie, but it was pretty bad. So now everything fully starts to explode. Room by room, everything's exploding. And I'm like, wow, I hope they're insured because that's a lot of tax dollars to rebuild this building. So we see D'Agusta get blown back from a door and knocked out. Then Margot is running down this hall. The Cathoga is hot on her heels. See what I did there? Hot. I'm here all week. Try the veal. So she runs and jumps into the big metal tank of rhinoceros soup, smacks a button that starts to auto close the door over the top. Just as she looks up, the Cathoga is leaning up on the top and on fire. And she yells, "You go to hell." And the lid closes, and then we see the explosion continue to wash over the room, and the Cathoga completely explodes into a million pieces. Then we fade to outside, and we see the mayor finding the police captain and telling him to leave D'Agusta alone because he's ranting about, I'm going to take his badge or whatever.
And I love that because it was there was this little tension between the two at first, and now they're you picture them being buddies and having spaghetti dinners later on together.
Right. No more talk about the wife's cleavage though, please. So inside, Hollingsworth and more cops find D'Agusta. Then they go into the lab and they open that container and they find Margot. She pulls the lucky bullet out of her cleavage and D'Agusta tells her to keep it. I don't think luck had anything to do with her escaping at the end here. It was all her know-how of the fire and making the explosives, but okay.
I mean, to me, I don't know if you thought the same thing. When he gave her the lucky bullet, I thought for sure at some point the bullet was going to be the thing that killed the Cathoga. I was like, you're foreshadowing this bullet of some kind of importance. This is going to be obviously the tool, the instrument of this monster's death. But instead, it spends the next 10, 15 minutes in her tits.
Right? Nestled in her bosom. So now we fade to the outside. So we fade now down the floor. We start seeing little pieces of things burning out and pieces of animal bits everywhere. And we see a Cathoga claw, like a full phalange, like knuckles and like a finger with a claw, perfectly preserved. This fucking thing was on fire, CGI fire from head to toe and exploded. And you mean to tell me there's a 12-inch plus long claw completely intact?
That was the one point where the fire didn't catch it. It's it was burning everywhere except for that one claw.
So then we get an outside shot of the museum as closing credits start to roll. And then we pull away and we pull away. And then we fade to black, the end. And that is The Relic.
Just listening to you talk about it again, I'm just reliving the movie.
It makes me want to watch it again. And I'm actually super excited that Mike has never seen it and wants to watch it because I'm up to watch it again right away.
Oh yeah, no, I'm going to try and get one of these days, get the girlfriend to watch it. Cause I was like, oh, you got to watch this with me. This is amazing.
Watch party. All right. Did we miss anything? Anything you wanted to touch on or point out or?
So I found some stuff on IMDb that I thought was kind of interesting. So earlier when we were talking about how, when it was released, it didn't do well in the box office. They originally projected it to be a bomb when it came out, the Scream and everything was coming out, big hits. So they knew this was going to bomb in the box office.
Well, that's why they put it in dump month. Yeah.
Yeah. And apparently it did on opening weekend. It performed 5 times higher than they had expected it to. Interesting connection as well. Audra Lindy was at one time married to James Whitmore.
Really?
Yep. They had been married for a brief period. Of course, they were divorced by the time they filmed this movie.
That's cool.
Peter Hyam originally wanted Harrison Ford to play D'Agusta.
No.
Yes. And I was like, when I read that, no. No one can replace Tom Sizemore. And a couple other people they were talking about for Dr. Frock were Alec Baldwin, Al Pacino, Christopher Lloyd, Robert De Niro.
Al Pacino.
That would have been
totally different movie.
I would have loved. I mean, like I like Whitmore as Frock. No one can replace him. But Al Pacino as Frock would have just been the interaction with the monster as his dying breath is hoo-ah.
No.
And that is pretty much the rest of everything that I have to say.
All right, let's jump to 3 questions then, shall we? So, you mentioned having the book or knowing of the book and liking the book. Have you read it, and have you heard from anyone who's read it maybe? It is Relic, and as we mentioned earlier, Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. It is the first in the 22 or 23 book series, because the newest one's coming out this year, the Agent Pendergast series. What are your thoughts on this? Have you read the first one, The Relic, or the second one, which is kind of a sequel called Reliquary? What do you think?
Yes, actually, and this is going to be a long monologue, so I apologize. This is one of the few movies that I have seen to where I actually enjoy the book equally to the movie. Like the only one off the top of my head I can think of is Frankenstein, which is like my all-time favorite book. The book, I actually picked it up reading it when I was working. They had it in the break room, picked it up, had already seen the movie, started reading it. I couldn't put the damn thing down. I read the shit out of this book. And then when I found out there was a sequel, I went and got the sequel. And I have been reading the series, the Pendergast series.
Okay.
Just enjoying the hell out of it because the character alone, Pendergast, he should have been in the damn movie.
So from my understanding, I've ordered the first 2 books. They're on their way to me. Thank you, Amazon. I'm going to read them. But my research on the internet shows that there are police in the book, but the agent is an FBI agent sent in to aid in the case with the police. Is that accurate?
He is a very odd, he's such a great character. It doesn't even become his series until I think like the 3rd book. Like he's not a main character. So like, don't go in thinking he's going to be like the star of the book or anything.
I was thinking that maybe the reason they didn't use him in the movie is that the way this movie is paced and all the characters, we didn't need another character. They flesh out D'Agusta and then they add Hollingsworth. I think they're great. We don't need a 3rd investigative body. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can understand why they didn't do it. And they did kind of, I did read that, D'Agusta in the movie is a little bit of an amalgam of Pendergast and Vincent from the books. So you kind of get that mixture. But it's just as a fan standpoint, I'm chomping at the bits to see a, movie, TV series, anything of Pendergast because I love this character so much. I want more. There's a few other characters that were not in the book or not in the movie that would have been cool to see. The reporter, William Smithback, he would have been awesome. He's a huge part of the book.
Oh, interesting.
Some other actually interesting things.
Don't give anything too much away though, because I haven't read the book and maybe a lot of the listeners are interested and haven't read it.
Oh, no. I'm just going to say like some of the things that were changed. Like in the book, the Cathoga, not the monster. That's the name of the tribe. The name of the monster is, I'm going to try to pronounce this and then spell it. So anyone who wants to give it a shot. Bwun is spelled Mbwun. That is the monster. So
Okay.
They changed that. I think they said they might have done it because like who the hell is going to be able to pronounce that, as I just butchered the name myself.
Is he still a chimera in the book? Is he still like a combination of different creatures?
Yeah, it's still the same plot. Okay, so the name of the creature translates to he who walks on all fours, which I thought was freaking awesome.
That's cool.
There are a couple of name changes, like, okay, Dr. Cuthbert isn't a woman in the book. It's Dr. Ian Cuthbert. So
okay.
Greg Lee is Gregory Kawakita.
So still an Asian male, but a much more complicated name.
Yeah, they changed some stuff, but it's like the changes they make work. So I was like, okay, it doesn't bother you. And I think it kind of helps that it makes it seem like you're kind of reliving the movie in a totally different way. You know what it is, but you get to experience more and new material.
I'm so excited to read the books. I can't wait till they get here. Let's go to question 2. Would you go to a museum if they had an exhibit like the superstition one in this movie? Have you been to any cool exhibits like this? I want to know.
Never. I've only been to one museum. They didn't have any cool exhibits like this. Like the exhibit I remember is the one in Carson, because of us being like a gold mining town and stuff like that. Like the end, when you're coming out of the museum, you go through some gold mining tunnels and stuff, and you see like little bits of gold and things. That was cool. I enjoyed that, but nothing like the superstition exhibit. I would go to that in a freaking heartbeat.
Did you get a museum near you? We have OMSI, the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, up here, or whatever it's called. And they did a big superhero traveling exhibit with all the Marvel stuff. And we didn't go to that. I was kind of bummed that my husband didn't like beg me to go. But we get some cool stuff up here sometimes.
Yeah, there's actually it wasn't a museum. We got a place up here called Rancho San Rafael. And it's like just a little park, and they have some stuff in there, like but they do have like a place for exhibits. I've been there a couple times, and I did go to the superhero one. That was so much fun, but I felt like such a loser because I'm like at the point I'm a 39-year-old man going with my 50-year-old brother. But it was still a lot of fun.
That's fun. Right?
Yeah, it was awesome. And then they came back again, and they did one that was like all fantasy creatures.
Very cool. Yeah, I'd be down for that. I would love a superstition like type exhibit or like horror stuff. Like I think I want to say Seattle, there's like a horror museum underground in this building where they have like horror movie memorabilia and all kinds of neat stuff. Like I haven't done that yet. So I would love to go to stuff like this. I just never think about it.
I never do either.
All right. Question 3. We're going to play a little game.
All right.
Called Name That Chimera. Cue game show music here. Da, 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 da. Name that chimera.
Come on down.
So I want you to tell me, I'm going to give you the animals that are in the chimera. I want you to tell me the name of this animal. Okay. So think Napoleon Dynamite. When you mix a lion and a tiger, what do you get?
Liger.
Okay. So here we go. You ready?
Okay.
What is the name of the chimera when you put together a bull and a sassy rooster?
I don't know the official name. I'm gonna go.
No, there is no official name. I made these up.
I'm gonna go bullcock.
Bullcocky. Yes.
Oh.
Bullcocky. Okay.
Oh, that one hit me right in the eye.
All right. Number 2. Name that chimera. What do you get when you put together 4 crows, She-Ra, the Princess of Power, and a billy goat?
Murder, She Goat.
Yes! Yes! You're 2 for 2. Ding, 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 ding.
Oh.
All right. Number 3. Name that chimera. What do you get with a crocodile and a shih tzu?
Crocoshit?
Crocoshit. Yes, very good. Last one. Name that chimera. I have put together 4 animals for you.
Oh, Lord.
We've got a killer whale, a llama, a dingo, and a dung beetle.
Okay, are we actually using killer whale or orca?
Do you remember years ago in San Diego, they had a killer whale exhibit at SeaWorld, and there was the main attraction killer whale? Do you remember his name?
It wasn't Shamu, was it?
Yes.
Okay, that's where I thought you were going. That's where I was like, okay, how is this going to work? Shamu, llama, ding dong.
Shamalama ding dong. Thank you very much.
Oh.
And that was Name That Chimera.
Oh.
You were really good at that game. I'm impressed.
I was trying to figure out, because the last one tricked me up, because I was like, okay, orca, killer whale. It wasn't until Shamu came in. I was like, okay, I see what you did there.
Because I'm fucking genius. I'm so clever. I laughed for a good 20 minutes when I came up with those. I'm so proud of myself.
I could just see like Mike walking in on you as you're like writing your notes, cracking up to yourself, being like, what the hell is going on in there?
That is what happened. And he's actually the one that gave me croco shit. So
I applaud him and bow to him, because that one was really good too.
Credit where credit is due. Yes.
Oh.
So that is the Relic 1997. If anyone's interested in checking it out, and I highly recommend a rewatch, Amazon Prime, MGM or Paramount Plus, and YouTube is where it is currently showing at the time of this recording. I want to thank you, sir, for joining me today to discuss this glorious monster movie.
It was a pleasure. It was awesome. And remember, folks, always eat all of your hypothalamus.
All right. We want to thank all of you for listening. And until next time, goodbye.
Could any of these rituals have anything to do with, say, ripping out the human hypothalamus?
Human hypothalamus.
The human hypothalamus.
Human hypothalamus.
Hypothalamus. Hypothalamus.
Hypothalamus.
This episode is dedicated to the memory of Tom Sizemore.
Hey, listeners, Drive-In Dave here saying we know you have a lot of options when it comes to podcasts, so we want to thank you so much for listening to ours. Please be sure to follow us on all your social media platforms. Join us in the Bad Movie Conversation. We're on Facebook with a Let's Talk Turkeys page, as well as a discussion group where you can chat with other people who also love bad movies. We're also on Instagram at Let's Talk Turkeys, all one word. Plus, we're on Twitter with the handle at Gobble Podcast. That's GOBBLEPODCAST. And of course, you can always email us direct at Let's Talk Turkeys, all one word, at yahoo.com.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.